Number 2 is right. If that girl in black hadn't been so fast, catching them off guard and knocking them off balance, they wouldn't have lost so miserably. Hearing this, Bai Zhanshan nodded in agreement. Yeah, as for that guy with the dead-eye aim, his physical stats are probably just average. He uses a gun to make up for his weak physique. In my eyes, that kind of person is nothing but a mediocrity. Thinks he can shoot us down? I won't give him the chance. And that girl who controls electricity, once she relies on her powers, there's no way she's better at close combat than me. Out of those 3, number 2 can easily handle 2 of them without breaking a sweat. I'll take care of the last one myself. Besides, we brought so many people with us, including brothers with awakened abilities. Using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken, what a waste. These words made Bai Zhanshan uncomfortable, as he had previously been defeated by me and forced to flee in humiliation. But thinking it over, he couldn't help but admit the analysis made sense. The problem now was how to find them. That kid turned a minibus into a supercar and vanished without a trace. What a headache. Bai Binghai chuckled coldly. Zhou Jing. An ordinary-looking middle-aged man stepped out from the group. He was smoking, a thick stench of tobacco clinging to him. With black and yellow teeth and hollow cheeks, he looked frail and weak. But I knew this guy was far from simple. Otherwise, Bai Binghai wouldn't have brought him along. Zhou Jing used to be a veteran homicide detective. Due to some past incidents, he was never promoted. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he wasn't just highly experienced. He had awakened a tracking ability. With Zhou Jing here, they believed no one could cause trouble on their turf without leaving a trace. Zhou Jing let out a raspy laugh, saying nothing, but his sweeping gaze made people feel like they were being stared down by a venomous snake. Even the small squad standing around felt uneasy. The pressure Bai Binghai exuded was even more terrifying than Bai Zhanshan's. At night, zombies are more active and mutated beasts come out to hunt. No matter how fast we run, we'll be forced to stop and rest when it gets dark. That's when they'll strike. Bai Zhanshan's eyes lit up. Perfect. He sneered, his voice dripping with malice. When he caught me, he'd make me regret ever being born. No problem. I haven't made a move in 2 days. I'd like to see if I've gotten rusty. A sharp dagger appeared in Bai Binghai's hand, spinning nimbly between his fingers. The glint of the blade reminded everyone of the people who had been hung up in the black market as a warning. A chill ran down their spines. When we catch that kid, you all should come join the fun. Treat it like a rabbit hunt. Times are too boring these days. Only things like this offer a little entertainment. The squads exchanged glances. They knew perfectly well this was Bai Binghai's way of asserting dominance, forcing everyone to witness my fate to crush any rebellious thoughts. Faced with the power of the 7 God squad, who would dare object? Sister Hong silently regretted the deal involving Rin Shiyu. She could have sold her for a great price, but in the end, I snatched her away. If that girl fell into the Bai family's hands, her fate would undoubtedly be tragic. Boss Yuan spat on the ground. He muttered that he absolutely had to stay and watch me beg for mercy on my knees. Earlier, he had been so terrified he flattened himself on the ground, losing all face. Now, hearing about the hunt for me, he was flushed with excitement, acting as if he were about to achieve some great merit. If I was really that strong, why did I run? That was the only thought in his head. Fatty Yuan immediately ordered his men to bring the cars, leading the convoy as they sped out of the black market. The other squads hurriedly followed. Watching this, Bai Zhanshan let out a cold smile. In his eyes, once discovered, I would definitely panic and flee. Zhou Jing walked out of the black market gates, but after just a few steps, he suddenly froze. He raised his head, his eyes filled with shock as he stared into the distance. At the same time, Fatty Yuan was leading the convoy, as thrilled as if he were on a hunt. But the smile on his face suddenly stiffened. In the distance, my minibus was charging straight at them like a frenzied beast, roaring down the asphalt road. Isn't that minibus his? It really is him. He came back. After awakening his ability, Fatty Yuan's eyesight was incredibly sharp. He could vaguely see me sitting in the passenger seat, and the person in black driving next to me was definitely Ying. In their eyes, my return was nothing short of suicide. The black market right now gathered almost all the major factions in Lon County. It was crowded, heavily armed, and packed with awakened users. The defenses were as tight as an impenetrable fortress. Even the squad leaders temporarily allied with Bai Zhanshan felt immense pressure, let alone me, a guy who had just barely escaped with his life, only to turn right back around. What is he coming back for? Has he lost his mind? Does he want to wipe us out and steal our supplies? One of Bai Binghai's subordinates sneered, making the whole crowd burst into roaring laughter. They laughed, but they still raised their guns in unison. Trying to take us on with just a minibus? It's the apocalypse, and an idiot like this has managed to survive until now? Fatty Yuan narrowed his eyes. Though he mocked me verbally, his hands hurriedly shifted into reverse and slammed the gas. Facing a madman head-on, he didn't dare take the gamble. Bai Binghai looked at my minibus like he was looking at a fool. He slowly lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and laughed disdainfully. To think he had to come back for a brainless punk like this. How utterly boring. He seemed certain I hadn't considered that this place had beefed up its defenses after the previous commotion. Bai Binghai exhaled a cloud of smoke and waved his hand, ordering his men to load their weapons. The sound of bolts racking echoed one after another. A dozen men behind him were ready for battle. They set up ballistic shields, joking and laughing as they waited for me to enter their firing range. With a formation like that, let alone a minibus, even an armored vehicle would have a hard time surviving. Once he's in range, shoot out the tires. Don't kill him. Take him alive so we can play with him slowly. That chilling voice made everyone who heard it shudder. The effective range of an assault rifle is only 300 to 400 meters, and hitting a target at 200 meters is already considered good. But right then, while the distance was still over 800 meters, a flat, UFO-like object suddenly emerged from the roof of my minibus, radiating a high-tech vibe. No one recognized what it was. No one had ever imagined a minibus could carry a gun turret. In the blink of an eye, the distance closed to just over 700 meters. I wasn't using a Type 95 assault rifle, but a Type 95 light machine gun. The longer, thicker barrel gave the bullets a muzzle velocity of nearly 1,000 meters per second, with an effective range of up to 800 meters. The firepower was completely overwhelming. I sat in the enclosed combat cabin, equipped with a 360-degree firing slit. It was absolutely safe and easily covered the entire area ahead. Jiang Zhuing stared in shock at the combat cabin that had appeared on the roof, but remembering my mechanical modification abilities, she quickly calmed down. From a distance, Ren Xiu saw dozens of enemies. The light reflecting off their ballistic shields and firearms made her feel suffocated. A single minibus facing this defensive line head-on. The disparity in strength was glaringly obvious. Ing hit the brakes. I had already mounted the gun on the firing slit. No scope needed, just relying on the iron sights. For me, this was a piece of cake. Throughout history, there have been snipers who hit targets at 600 or 700 meters without a scope. Did the car stop? Why did it stop? The guards at the black market gates were surprised to see me stop over 700 meters away, while outside their effective range. Bai Binghai sneered, assuming I had seen their formation and was preparing to turn tail and run. But it was too late. Just as Bai Zhanshan nodded to order the pursuit, an overwhelming sense of danger suddenly washed over him, like the Grim Reaper's scythe resting on his neck. Without thinking, he threw himself to the side. In that exact moment, a hail of bullets from my machine gun swept through. 3 armed subordinates standing next to Bai Zhanshan were gunned down on the spot. The bullets had lost some velocity over the long distance, but when they tore into human flesh, the devastation was even more horrific, shredding internal organs in an instant. Bai Zhanshan rolled on the ground, his mind completely blank. Bai Binghai dropped his cigarette. In his line of sight, my minibus was only the size of a fist. Yet the incoming fire was deadly accurate from such an extreme distance. Sniper rifles can't fire fully automatic. An assault rifle or machine gun shooting this far and this accurately. It was absurd, yet it was happening right before their eyes. While Bai Binghai was still trying to process it, a sudden, extreme sense of danger surged within him. Take cover. Hurry, take cover. Someone screamed. Bai Binghai didn't even care about his image anymore. He instantly dropped to the ground and rolled to the side. Boom, boom, boom. The concrete stalls were shredded by my barrage, sending debris flying everywhere. 2 subordinates were shot through the head on the spot. One even had half his skull blown off, blood and brains splattering across the ground. Before the apocalypse, Just looking at this would make someone vomit. But now, even though they were used to life and death, the henchmen still turned pale. The small squads following by Binghai began to panic. Fatty Yuan was sweating bullets, curling up behind a concrete wall, not daring to peek out. Sister Hong was trembling too, her face as pale as a frightened rabbit. At such a distance, the bullets arrived before the sound of the gunshots. You wouldn't even know how you died. It's him. The kid who bought Renshiyu. He's the one shooting, and his aim is terrifyingly accurate. Sister Hong screamed in panic. Previously, I had dual-wielded pistols and taken down 6 or 7 gunmen in the blink of an eye. But this was even more terrifying. Stretching the distance to 700 meters and still hitting the target? It was like he was using an aimbot. Damn it. How is he this good? Is he special forces? Bai Binghai pressed himself against the concrete wall, his face looking incredibly grim. Just moments ago, he had been calmly giving orders. Now, he didn't dare show his face. A single firing position suppressing dozens of people sounded unbelievable, but it was happening right in front of them. At 700 meters, they couldn't fight back. They could only sit there and take it. Where's the machine gun? Bai Zhanshan remembered the Type 95 machine gun he had bought for me earlier. That model had an effective range of up to 800 meters. At the very least, they could return fire. Right here, Boss Bai. A subordinate brought the Type 95 machine gun over, loading it behind the concrete wall. Let Liangzi shoot. He's the sharpshooter in our squad. If he hadn't gotten drunk and harassed women back in the day, he wouldn't have been stuck here in Lan County, Bai Binghai said, pointing at the short guy hiding behind the wall. Bai Zhanshan tossed the gun to Liangzi, telling him that after this fight, he could have any woman he wanted. No need to harass anyone. What a sweet piece of hardware. Liangzi licked his lips, gripping the machine gun. In the Lan squad, he had never laid hands on gear this good. As he spoke, he expertly adjusted the iron sights. The heavy 75-round drum magazine in his hands gave him a solid sense of security. Don't conserve ammo. Just one hit is all we need. If we blow his gas tank, he's crippled. He won't be able to run. Don't worry. Hitting a person is hard, but hitting a car is easy. Liangzi said this as he rolled over to another section of the wall. That wall had a gap only as wide as a hand, offering a clear view of my minibus. He quietly slid the barrel through the gap, bracing the gun tightly against the edge of the wall. No bipod needed. Bai Binghai nodded in satisfaction. For a good shooter, marksmanship isn't the most important thing. Knowing how to choose a firing position is. Liangzi's spot was practically a fortified bunker. Bai Zhanshan also nodded, thinking to himself that a military background really was different from their ragtag bunch. We'll use the very gun he sold us to shoot him down. Let him taste his own medicine. Bai Zhanshan gritted his teeth as he spoke. But the moment the words left his mouth, bang! One of my bullets threaded perfectly through that tiny gap, shattered the concrete edge, and struck Liangzi dead in the center of his forehead. Liangzi's head snapped back as if hit by a sledgehammer. His body was thrown backward, slamming hard into the ground. The Type 95 machine gun flew out of his hands. He lay motionless, a massive hole in his head, blood and brains spilling everywhere. His eyes were still wide open, staring blankly at the sky, his gaze frozen in shock. He's dead. Bai Zhanshan and Bai Binghai were only 3 or 4 meters away from Liangzi. From the moment he peeked out to observe until he stuck the barrel through, the entire process took barely 2 or 3 seconds. A gap only as wide as a hand. At a distance of 700 meters, it was hard enough just to see it clearly. Yet I had hit it with pinpoint accuracy. What kind of monstrous marksmanship was that? The squad's best sharpshooter was taken out before he could even pull the trigger. Such a massive gap in skill left them with nothing but despair. It wasn't just Bai Binghai and Bai Zhanshan. The others broke out in a cold sweat too, completely losing any will to keep fighting. After all, this battle had nothing to do with them in the first place. Maybe this kid awakened a shooting ability, Bai Binghai said in a low voice, and no one argued with that theory. His gun is too terrifying. Set up more cover. Fall back to the trading hall. We'll use that place to shoot it out with him. The glass in the hall is frosted. No matter how good his aim is, it'll be useless. Do it now. Bai Binghai's group grabbed 7 or 8 ballistic shields, huddling behind them as they retreated, setting up concrete slabs as additional cover along the way. Thanks to this, they could stay completely hidden, falling back to the trading hall without giving me a chance to shoot them. "Retreat carefully," someone yelled. My machine gun had stopped firing, and at this distance, the bullets no longer had enough kinetic energy to pierce the shields and concrete walls. No one dared to peek out and check, because Liangzi was the clearest proof of what would happen. However, just as they were slowly retreating, the roar of an engine suddenly erupted. Virum, virum, virum. The sound was like a jet taking off, hurtling toward them at terrifying speed, carrying a heavy, suffocating pressure. That sound, it's an engine. What the hell is going on? One of Fatty Yuan's lackeys couldn't handle the horrifying noise rushing up from behind. He carefully peeked through a gap in their cover, glancing quickly over his shoulder. In just a few short seconds, my minibus, which had been 700 meters away and looked the size of a fist, had closed the distance to less than 100 meters. What kind of insane speed is this? The engine roared like a beast of steel. That lackey had followed Fatty Yuan to hunt plenty of mutated beasts, but the pressure and terror this minibus brought far exceeded those monsters. "Boss, it's charging right at us," he screamed. Fatty Yuan had already been scared out of his wits by my marksmanship. His only thought was to get inside the trading hall as fast as possible, completely ignoring his subordinate's words. "What are you talking about? Is he stupid? Charging in to die? We still have multiple layers of defense." Before he could finish, his voice caught in his throat. A massive crash echoed from behind. Fatty Yuan looked through the gap, and his face instantly contorted in horror. My minibus was roaring straight down the Black Market Road, sending stalls on both sides flying. At the market entrance, the parked cars were smashed into like tofu, launched into the air. This minibus was no different from a missile. For that frenzied beast of steel, 100 meters was practically nothing. Ing floored the gas pedal. Right ahead was the defensive wall by Zhanshan, and his crew had set up. Sitting on the sofa, seatbelt fastened tight, Ren Shiyu's palms were drenched in sweat. Watching the vehicle barrel straight toward a reinforced concrete wall felt exactly like riding a roller coaster. Eyes wide open, watching herself plummet toward the ground. Even now, I wasn't slowing down. Lunatic. Fatty Yuan's eyelids twitched violently. Crashing into concrete at this speed would mean the car gets crushed and everyone inside dies. Suddenly, a UFO-like object appeared on the roof of the minibus, and a pitch-black gun barrel extended from it. Terror instantly exploded. Fatty Yuan flattened himself against the ground. Bang! Bang! Gunfire erupted, and a wave of scorching heat swept right over his head. Fatty Yuan's entire body trembled. He looked back and saw the lackey from earlier collapse with wide, staring eyes, his skull shattered. Blood and gore splattered all over his face. Fatty Yuan pressed himself hard against the dirt. No matter how gutsy he was, he didn't dare lift his head now. Seeing the doors of the trading hall right in front of him, he immediately scrambled up and dashed for it. Image meant absolutely nothing right now. Bai Binghai and Bai Zhanshan saw the whole thing too. Motherfucker. This minibus is completely insane. And right at that moment, I reached the defensive wall. Ren Shiyu's heart leaped into her throat, and she couldn't hold back a scream. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan also felt their bodies go rigid. But Ing continued to steer coldly, with absolutely no intention of hitting the brakes. Ying's consciousness was directly linked to mine and the minibus. Every status of the vehicle was under control. The only command I transmitted to Ing at that moment was a single phrase: ram straight through. The moment the command was executed, a strange mechanical sound rang out. Gaps suddenly appeared on the front of the minibus, and then a massive, cone-shaped block of metal, radiating a high-tech aura, thrust out from within. Surrounding it were 4 shorter metal cones, gleaming alloy steel spikes, brimming with lethal intent. Amidst the roaring engine, it charged straight at the defensive wall like a beast of steel. Bai Binghai and Bai Zhanshan's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. A row of steel spikes suddenly jutted out from the front of the minibus. This scene looked like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi movie, completely beyond their imagination. A deafening crash echoed as the concrete shattered, and a cloud of dust instantly engulfed the entire area. Outside, it suddenly fell dead silent, making the survivors feel like they were in a dream. But looking around, everyone was disheveled and panicked, their hearts still pounding wildly. That was a true escape by the skin of their teeth. Those who thought they were thriving in this apocalyptic world suddenly realized they weren't much stronger than ordinary people. The gap was simply too massive. They used to look down on ordinary people, but standing before me, they were exactly like them, maybe even more pathetic. Thinking back to the sight of my minibus plowing straight into them, a chill ran down the survivors' spines. In front of that vehicle, they were nothing but tofu. Bai Binghai had just rolled into cover as well, covered head to toe in dirt and dust, completely losing his mob boss aura. His face darkened as he slowly stood up and looked around. Just moments ago, he had boldly led his men to kill me. Yet in the blink of an eye, there were dead and wounded everywhere, and the survivors were pale as ghosts. Seeing a lackey beside him still shivering, his fury flared even higher. The humiliation burned his scalp. Don't worry, that kid won't dare come in here. Bai Zhanshan was also incredibly frustrated. He had originally wanted to kill me to establish his dominance, never expecting to be counterattacked so miserably. Hearing this, the other squads just exchanged glances. No one spoke. Even if he doesn't dare come in, we can't go out either. Finally, one squad leader couldn't hold back and set it straight. No matter how strong the Bai brothers were, when their lives were on the line, that strength meant nothing. Not to mention, right now, Bai Binghai didn't dare lay a hand on them. So what do we do now? Someone asked in frustration. You're the ones who told us to stay, saying it would be like hunting a rabbit. But look at us now. We're all trapped in here by him. As soon as those words fell, the other squads immediately reacted. Especially the squads that had lost their leaders. Their resentment was even heavier. With their leaders dead, their combat power plummeted, and their situation instantly became dire. If they hadn't been forced to stay, it would never have come to this. Bai Zhanshan looked at the scene before him, frustrated to the extreme. The prestige he had worked so hard to build was about to go up in smoke. After today, who would still respect the Seven God Squad? This black market might even have to shut down. The people who usually called him Boss Bai, who were so eager to hunt just moments ago, now pulled their heads in like turtles at the first sign of trouble, not daring to make a peep. We're already inside the trading hall. What are you still afraid of? Get your guns to the windows and shoot him dead. Bai Zhanshan roared. But the only response was people exchanging glances. No one dared to move. My firepower was too terrifying. Who would dare peek out? Bai Zhanshan's face flushed with anger, silently cursing them as useless cowards. Bastards. Just then, Bai Binghai suddenly slammed his hand on the table, his deep, cold voice ringing out. No need to rush the shooting. We're all in the same boat now. He's blocking the door with his car, so we can't get out, but he doesn't dare come in either. Besides, we're on the defensive. He can't win a shootout against us. His gaze swept over the other squads, so cold it made quite a few people shudder. Even so, there were some who weren't afraid of him, because right now, Bai Binghai didn't dare make a move either. Second brother Bai is right. Fatty Yuan stood up, his heart filled with both hatred and fear toward me. He looked at the men he had brought. Now, only 2 were left alive. A simple black market trade, yet because of me, he had suffered disastrous losses. I was still outside the door. Did I think I was invincible? An arrogant punk like that, refusing to leave, is just courting death. Enough ants can bite an elephant to death. Fatty Yuan said loudly. The more he spoke, the more agitated he got, believing that if they just dragged this out until nightfall, my guns would be useless. I only had 2 people capable of close combat. I wouldn't be able to do a thing. For now, they just needed to play weak and keep me stalled. Bai Binghai glanced at Fatty Yuan, secretly surprised. This fat guy wasn't as stupid as he thought. It really was a good way to deal with an arrogant fool. We'll just wait until dark. Bai Binghai nodded. He's blocking the door, but doesn't dare come in. We have nothing to fear. Right at that moment, as Fatty Yuan was waving his arms in excitement, he suddenly felt his entire body vibrate. A freezing chill shot straight from the soles of his feet up his spine. What's happening? Before he could even react, a deafening explosion rang in his ears. The last thing he saw was the trading hall spinning violently, along with the terrified faces of people he knew. Exactly like the moment he had seen a squad leader get stabbed to death. Boom. Fatty Yuan's massive body was sent flying, slamming hard into the wall like a balloon filled with blood. His eyes bulged. His body was covered in wounds, looking no different from a torn sack. Blood poured out everywhere. Ugh. He wasn't completely dead yet. His fat-laden body and mutant physique allowed him to cling to his last breath. Fatty Yuan looked around in despair, managing to let out a feeble cry. Help! Save me! But right now, no one cared about him anymore. Sister Hong stared at the door, trembling, her legs turning to jelly. The thick iron doors, which had been heavily reinforced, were blown wide open. Aside from Fatty Yuan, the few guys standing near the door had been blown to pieces along with it, turned into a pile of mangled flesh. The ground was torn up, the floor tiles shattered, everything twisted and deformed. Through the destroyed doors, the survivors saw my minibus parked quietly a short distance away. On the roof, a pitch-black cannon barrel was slowly retracting. The gleaming metal spikes, the sleek body of the vehicle, and the prominent combat cabin on top. It was all like a brutal slap straight to the faces of Bai Binghai and his crew. CH. In the dead silence, someone's teeth were chattering uncontrollably. This vehicle, what kind of monster is it? The doors suddenly being blown open left everyone completely stunned. Blood splattered everywhere. The chaotic scene before them sent shivers down everyone's spines. What the hell is going on? Hadn't they just been so sure that as long as they got inside the trading hall, they'd be safe? That I wouldn't be able to do anything to them? Yet now, the iron doors had been shredded like wet paper. These doors had been specially reinforced and welded shut by Zhanshan's men to fend off zombies and mutated beasts. The black market was his base. Defense was always the top priority. Even the windows were welded shut with thick iron grates. That was exactly why everyone had breathed a sigh of relief when they made it into the trading hall. Even Fatty Yuan had dared to crawl up and scream about killing me. But before they could even catch their breath, the only place considered safe had been breached. Sister Hong hurriedly backed up against the wall, filled with endless regret. If she had known it would come to this, she would have left long ago. The others in the squads frantically scrambled for cover. Fatty Yuan, lying flat on the ground groaning, became living proof that standing out in the open right now was nothing short of suicide. Right then, Bai Binghai's furious roar echoed through the trading hall. What are you standing around for? Grab your guns and shoot him dead. He was the first to duck behind a ballistic shield, snatching an assault rifle from a subordinate's hands. The rest of the crowd was so terrified they just stood there frozen, momentarily unsure of how to return fire. Hearing that shout, Bai Zhanshan also snapped back to reality. He grabbed a light machine gun, his body swelling up as he transformed into a bear man. The cannon barrel has retracted. Just stay away from the cannon. Take this chance to shoot his minibus to pieces. That cannon blast just now was terrifying. But as long as they could destroy the vehicle, I would lose half my combat power. Then, no matter how good my guns were, I'd be dead meat. This idiot wants to die. Hurry up. Do it. Bai Zhanshan roared. The squad members finally regained their senses. This vehicle was too terrifying. That cannon blast was no different from a bomb. If they didn't kill me and shred the car, they'd all be doomed sooner or later. Open fire. Everyone flipped tables for cover, aimed their guns at the door, and squeezed their triggers. My vehicle was parked outside, so massive they didn't even need to aim to hit it. But they didn't dare aim anyway. My bullets seemed to have eyes. Anyone who peeked out died. Gunfire roared continuously. Bai Binghai's face was twisted in rage. Shooting like this, if I didn't die, the car would definitely be torn to shreds. The driver had to be riddled with holes like a sieve by now. A twisted sense of pleasure surged in his heart. Since awakening his ability, this was the first time he had suffered such massive losses. Fury boiled within him. He just wanted to drag me out of the car and torture me to death. He frantically fired over a dozen rounds, shivering with delight as he heard the bullets ping against the vehicle's body. But right at that moment, the familiar roar of the engine sounded again. My minibus was still running. Over 100 bullets just now, yet the vehicle was completely intact. The engine roared as the vehicle began to reverse, leaving everyone dead silent. Bai Binghai pressed against the window, carefully peeking out, and froze. The minibus wasn't damaged at all. It didn't even show signs of wear. There were only a few bullet marks on the windshield, but nothing had penetrated. This vehicle couldn't just ram and fire cannons. It was bulletproof too. He was going out of his mind. I had just fired a cannon, and now I was casually backing up. Meanwhile, aside from wasting ammo, they hadn't caused a single scratch. Is he retreating? Sister Hong asked, her voice trembling. But everyone knew deep down that I could easily back up, then return to fire again whenever I wanted. Just standing there waiting to die? Even if it was bulletproof, this trading hall couldn't take a few more cannon blasts. The thought of fleeing began to spread. Even Bai Binghai was no exception. He still had a way out, retreating to the armed police base in Lan County. Once there, no matter how arrogant I was, coming after him would be pure suicide. The losses today were too massive. This grudge absolutely could not be let go. Bai Binghai signaled to Zhou Jing. This guy had a scrawny build, looking like a sickly monkey, but he was incredibly agile. Using the pile of corpses as cover, he quietly crawled outside. Before long, Zhou Jing had sneaked over to the modified armed police vehicle and hotwired it. As soon as Bai Binghai made it out, they would immediately drive off and escape. But Bai Binghai wasn't in a rush. He knew the other squads wanted to run too. If they rushed out first, they would naturally become meat shields. As long as I backed up just a little further, even knowing they might get shot, these people would risk their lives to charge out. However, right at that moment, the engine roared again. Along with the rushing engine came a deafening crash. Everyone stared wide-eyed as an armed police vehicle was launched into the air, flipping several times before smashing into a roadside shop. Zhou Jing was inside that car. He hadn't even had the chance to poke his head out before being crushed to death. Blood seeped from the door seams as my minibus roared forward. The terrifying spikes on the front plowed through every car parked outside. Not just by Zhanshan's vehicles, but Sister Hong's and the others' cars were also sent flying one by one, pinned against the walls, twisted and deformed. They let out a sickening crunch as they were crushed into scrap metal. My actions were no different from a giant stomping on a colony of ants. The cars were gone. I had directly cut off their entire escape route. Inside the vehicle, Rin Xiyu was stunned. She had thought my return was reckless, but she never expected that with just one person and one vehicle, I would completely crush every faction in the black market. Looking at the cars being tossed aside, she didn't know what to say. By doing this, I clearly intended to wipe them all out. It wasn't until the last car parked in front of the trading hall was smashed that I told Ing to steer the vehicle, turning its nose back toward the main doors. Behind those doors, it was dead silent. Inside the trading hall, no one spoke for a long time. First, the main doors were blown apart. Then, the vehicles outside were smashed and flipped. It all left everyone's minds completely blank. They had all seen Zhou Jing sneak out, only to be crushed. When they finally snapped out of it, everyone's first reaction boiled down to one word: run. If we don't run, are we just going to stay here and wait to die? Just a few minutes ago, no one would have thought that on the Bai brothers' turf, they would be driven to the point of fleeing in chaos by a single minibus. The cars were gone. If they wanted to run, they had to rely on their own 2 feet. Could it get any more pathetic? Going outside meant they might run into zombies, but they'd worry about that later. At least there was a chance to survive. Staying here meant certain death. Smash. A squad leader immediately pried open a back window, turning his head to curse out the 7 God squad. He had lost several subordinates and suffered heavy casualties. He no longer thought about getting revenge on me, instead venting all his resentment on Bai Zhanshan. Before, he wouldn't have dared to utter a peep, but when his life was on the line, who cared about face? Seeing him lead his men to flee, the others couldn't hold back anymore either. Sister Hong stealthily followed, not daring to stay a second longer. Right now, I was the biggest threat. No one cared about the 7 God squad anymore. If pushed to the brink, they would all just die together. Bai Zhanshan's face was incredibly grim. From the moment their cars were smashed by me, his heart had sunk. Those people fleeing meant his black market had completely collapsed. He gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. This black market was the starting point of his ambitions, yet it had been leveled in just a few minutes. The agony made him want to charge out immediately and shoot my vehicle to pieces. Just then, Bai Zhanshan saw his third in command, along with 2 other awakened users, leading a few people to sneak out. You want to run? His face twisted in rage. The third in command held his gun defensively, saying that if they didn't retreat, did he want the brothers to die for nothing? Another awakened user was even more blunt, saying they just wanted to live. They didn't join the 7 God squad to throw their lives away. Everyone understood that facing me, Someone would definitely have to stay behind as a sacrifice, and the Bai brothers weren't going to be the ones. Bai Zhanshan raised his gun, roaring that if it weren't for those 4 mutant cores, which of them wouldn't have been greedy for them? If I hadn't come back, who would have dared object? The third in command calmly replied that this was their choice. When Bai Zhanshan raised his gun, everyone immediately aimed their guns back at him. The air froze. Bai Zhanshan was trembling with rage, truly wanting to unload his clip and blow their heads off. Brother, Bai Binghai spoke up to stop him, telling him to let them go. The third in command gave Bai Zhanshan a deep look before leading his men out of the room. Watching them leave, the veins on Bai Zhanshan's forehead throbbed violently. His heart was filled with hatred for the betrayal, but even more hatred for me. Bai Binghai said in a low voice that since things had come to this and the others had escaped, they also needed to find a chance to retreat. If the black market falls, it falls. As long as we're alive and still have our strength, we can always rise again in this apocalypse. Running into me was just their bad luck. But escaping wouldn't be easy. Looking outside and seeing the minibus with its razor-sharp spikes and the combat cabin on the roof made their scalps tingle. Would I let them escape? He said I held grudges and was ruthless. Running straight out would be very difficult, but if they could distract me, they might just have a chance. A vicious glint flashed in his eyes. Bai Zhanshan hurriedly asked for the plan. Bai Binghai said that no matter how tough my vehicle was, it wasn't tougher than explosives. He then signaled for a leather bag. Inside were 5 or 6 grenades. Combined with the grenades I had sold them earlier, it would be enough to turn my vehicle to ash. Bai Zhanshan's eyes lit up. Using my own grenades to kill me. Bai Binghai only picked a few men skilled in close combat with military backgrounds to follow him out. The rest of Bai Zhanshan's men hid behind cover, aiming their guns at the main doors. Bai Zhanshan clenched his fists, cold sweat pouring down his face. He laughed maniacally, telling me to just wait to go to heaven. Inside the minibus, Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan looked at the tossed cars, unable to contain their excitement. Compared to the refrigerated truck from before, this was a true apocalyptic survival machine. It crushed whatever it hit, brutal and simple. Ren Xiu looked at the 2 large men, their faces flushed with excitement. Even though she felt it was a bit overkill, she couldn't deny that sitting in this vehicle, watching everything get crushed, gave her an indescribable sense of joy. Having been locked in a cage, waiting for others to decide her fate, she now saw that those people were no different from how she used to be. Ing and I understood each other perfectly. Crushing those cars was just a small appetizer. I didn't just blockade one side of the trading hall. I cut off every route of retreat. I didn't come back to defeat Bai Zhanshan. I came back to kill. Virum. The minibus charged straight at the trading hall like a beast. Inside the combat cabin, I aimed my gun directly at the main doors. Bai, get your ass out here and die. You Bai bastards, come out and die. Come out and die. Die. My roar echoed through the black market's trading hall. Before the apocalypse, this place was just a warehouse for the Lon County market. Now, the sound bounced off every concrete wall. It spread across the entire black market area, making Bai Zhanshan and Bai Binghai glare in fury. I knew perfectly well that if they didn't kill me today, all the prestige the Bai brothers had built up over so long would vanish into thin air. This kid is too damn arrogant. Bai Binghai cursed as he held the bag of grenades, using steel wire to tie all the safety pins together. Right then, the mobile base's engine roared fiercely. I didn't need to speak. My thoughts were transmitted directly to Ing. The mobile base howled like a wild beast, charging straight at the cover where Bai Binghai and the armed police squad were hiding. The cold, razor-sharp spikes on the front, the violent ramming force of the mobile base, combined with the roof-mounted machine gun I controlled, instantly drowned them all in terror. Damn it! Bai Binghai screamed and cursed. Under my dense hail of bullets, they didn't dare poke their heads out at all. Scatter! Bai Zhanshan roared. But at the same time, their cover was smashed to pieces by the front of my vehicle. The road cops following Bai Binghai were mostly ordinary people. Normally, they looked incredibly imposing, holding guns to intimidate and oppress survivors. But facing the mobile base, their morale quickly collapsed. One guy held an automatic rifle, firing wildly at the mobile base, but the bullets hitting the windshield and tires were completely useless. Bang! Bang! 3 shots rang out. Before the shooter could even cry out, His head was blown off. Another man was shot through the chest, his upper body mangled, dying on the spot. At this close range, getting hit by a machine gun meant only one outcome: dying without an intact corpse. That sight sent shock and terror spreading everywhere, striking directly at their psyche. The roar of the mobile base's engine sounded like the long howl of the Grim Reaper. I controlled the vehicle, bringing the spiked front and the machine gun, plowing straight into the trading hall. Wherever the vehicle passed, only rivers of blood remained. The rogue cops began to scatter in panic. Plans meant nothing now. They only regretted not having a few extra legs to run faster. Even the men who had followed him from the police station were fleeing, driving by Binghai absolutely insane. He knew that once these guys escaped, they would never dare return to the Lon County police station for fear of retaliation. If this kept up, even if he managed to kill me, his foundation would collapse, and he'd have to start everything from scratch. "Stop. Driver. We can talk." Bai Binghai hid behind a concrete wall, not daring to peek out, and shouted at the top of his lungs. I paused slightly, not expecting him to still want to negotiate at a time like this. I was curious to hear what he had to say, even though I didn't believe he was naive enough to think a few words could buy his life. "Brother, I know your vehicle is incredibly strong. But a strong vehicle doesn't mean you yourself are strong. You're a great shot, sure, but what about your close combat skills? Can your muscles and flesh stop a knife or a bullet?" Seeing the mobile base slow down, Bai Binghai immediately seized the chance, trying to stall for time. Sitting in the combat cabin, I smirked slightly. I wanted to see just how far he could take this bluff. Maybe you don't know this, but the military has set up a research base on Chongming Island. They're researching how to extract energy crystals from mutant beast meat and mutant cores. They're calling them evolution crystals for now. This stuff can accelerate human evolution, especially mutant cores. If extracted into evolution crystals and absorbed, whether you're an ordinary person or an awakened user, your abilities will skyrocket. He spoke very fast, making me freeze for a moment. Evolution crystals? I knew perfectly well he was trying to trick me, but my intuition told me this might actually be real. Seeing that I seemed interested, Bai Binghai spoke even more enthusiastically. He analyzed how mutant beast meat, even without a fridge, could only be preserved for about a month, and an awakened user's absorption capacity was limited. Even an awakened user with a great digestive system could only eat 20 or 30 pounds of meat a meal. A ton of meat would take nearly 20 days to finish. And in high-intensity combat, that amount of energy simply wasn't enough. Without enough energy, how can you evolve? How can you increase your strength? It's no different from raising tigers and wolves, but only feeding them bran. But with evolution crystals, it's different. Just eating one a day can quickly complete your evolution. Even for an ordinary person, just one crystal can give them the physique of a professional martial artist. With enough crystals, turning ordinary people into fighters as strong as awakened users isn't impossible. His words sounded both logical and incredibly tempting. I knew very well that even the amount of mutant beast meat Jiang Jing ate wasn't providing enough energy, slowing down her evolution process. The skyrocketing price of mutant cores earlier had already proven their importance. If evolution crystals really existed, their value would undoubtedly far exceed anything from before the apocalypse. Even massive diamonds couldn't compare. Right then, Ing shook her head, her voice echoing directly in my mind. "Brother Jiang, evolution crystals are nothing special. With just one level 2 mutant core, the mobile base can also unlock the energy crystal extraction lab. The crystals produced by the star seed will definitely be of much higher quality than anything humans can make. Furthermore, the gene evolution fluid in the biological lab can only be used by you. But energy crystals can be used by anyone. An energy crystal extraction lab? My interest was genuinely piqued. The evolutionary path of the mobile base still wasn't entirely clear. Many functions were waiting to be unlocked, and the energy crystal extraction lab was clearly a crucial branch. Previously, my food consisted mainly of mutant beast meat. Before my brain evolved, eating about a pound per meal was my limit. After evolving, my intake increased to a few pounds, but that still wasn't enough to provide the energy needed to modify my body. If I had energy crystals, I had no doubt that once successfully extracted, they would instantly become the ultimate luxury item in the post-apocalyptic world, perhaps even serving as a high-end currency. These thoughts flashed through my mind very quickly, but my vigilance never left me for even a second. Just then, Bai Binghai continued speaking, his tone full of temptation. He asked if I found it appealing, then stated bluntly that evolution crystals were still in the experimental phase, but his armed police squad had connections with the military. The head of the armed police branch had personal ties with the military. As long as I agreed to a deal, I could absolutely trade weapons and mutant cores for a few evolution crystals to boost my personal strength. Those words sounded incredibly enticing. But right then, Rin Xiu suddenly frowned, whispering to remind me that he was lying. I smiled. I knew she had a mental ability and could vaguely sense the other party's psychological state. But honestly, I didn't need her reminder. I knew perfectly well that Bai Binghai was just trying to stall for time. I slowly lowered the Type 95 machine gun. While he was rambling on, my hyper-evolved brain had already grasped every movement in the surroundings. With the 360-degree vision in the combat cabin, not a single blind spot escaped my eyes. It was very clear. In a hidden corner of the trading hall, a spot that even the rearview mirrors would have trouble seeing. A burly figure was stealthily pulling a cluster of grenades from a bag. It was Bai Zhanshan. He had transformed into his bearman form. The grenades were tied tightly together. A single pull would yank all the pins at once. In this state, he was no different from a mobile mortar, fully capable of throwing them accurately at the mobile base. If all those grenades went off at once, no matter how durable the mobile base was, it would be hard-pressed to withstand it. Even if the armor didn't break, the vehicle would definitely flip. If the vehicle flipped right here, the consequences would be disastrous. I understood perfectly. This was the Bai brothers' final strike. One stood out to draw attention, while the other silently launched a sneak attack from behind. But how could I let them get their way? I locked the Type 95 machine gun in place facing the front of the vehicle, then pulled out the Type 81 assault rifle. On the surface, the direction of my gun hadn't changed at all, but in reality, all my focus was locked onto the rear. My finger rested on the trigger, but I didn't rush to pull it. I knew awakened users had incredibly sharp intuition for danger. The moment a gun was pointed at them, they would instantly sense it. I waited patiently, waiting for the exact moment Bai Zhanshan placed his hand on the grenade pins. Right then, the corners of my mouth curled into a cold smile. Bai Binghai was still trying to talk, saying that as long as I spared them, we could still do business in the future, and killing them now wouldn't bring me any benefits. At the exact same time, Bai Zhanshan pulled all the grenade pins, a maniacal smile spreading across his ferocious bare face. The moment he made his move, an intense sense of danger suddenly washed over him. Almost simultaneously, I aimed and pulled the trigger. Gunfire erupted in rapid succession. Bullets flew out one after another, giving him absolutely no chance. Even if he sensed the danger beforehand, dodging still took time. At such close range, bullets from a Type 81 assault rifle were incredibly lethal. Even though he tried his hardest to dodge, he didn't have time to throw the grenades. A scream of agony rang out. A bullet tore straight through Bai Zhanshan's left shoulder. If he had been a fraction of a second slower, that shot would have pierced his heart. Blood sprayed everywhere. The bullet passed through his body, dragging out a massive chunk of flesh and blood. If his body hadn't been enhanced, this single shot would have been enough to rip his entire left arm off. Even so, after taking the hit, he completely lost the ability to keep fighting. The excruciating pain sent his whole body into spasms, and he collapsed straight to the ground. The cluster of grenades fell with him. 7 or 8 grenades tied tightly together, all with their pins pulled. Bai Zhanshan's eyes went bloodshot, his face contorted in a mix of agony and sheer terror. He saw the cluster of grenades land right next to his face, but his severely injured body made it impossible for him to throw them away. In that moment, the world seemed to slow down. Sound and time felt as if they had been drained away. He thrashed wildly, desperately reaching for the grenades, but it was too late. A deafening explosion roared. All the grenades detonated at once. Fierce flames surged upward, and a shockwave swept through the trading hall. Even sitting inside the mobile base, I clearly felt the vehicle shake violently. Luckily, the shockwave hit the rear of the vehicle. If it had hit the side, the car very well might have flipped. As for Bai Zhanshan, he didn't even have time to make another sound. His body was blown to pieces, leaving not a single trace behind. The destructive power of that explosion was so massive that not just a human body, but even a tank could have been destroyed. Bai Binghai's scream echoed as he watched his older brother get swallowed by the sea of fire. For a man full of ambition, his brother's death didn't make him despair out of familial love. But in this situation, it meant he had stepped very close to his own death. He screamed like a madman, swearing he would kill me. Seeing me shift my gun toward the rear, Bai Binghai immediately seized the opportunity, leaping from his cover and charging straight at the mobile base. In that instant, the muscles all over his body emitted a metallic sheen, as if cast from bronze. In his hands was a steel pillar as thick as an adult's arm, weighing 500 or 600 kilograms, yet he wielded it like a spear. Bai Binghai charged forward, channeling all his strength, aiming the steel pillar straight at the windshield. He clearly intended to pierce the glass and kill Ing, who was driving my mobile base. Bai Binghai's ability was body metallization. In essence, it was the same as Bai Zhanshan's. Both were transformation-type abilities. When his body shifted into a metallic state, his strength and defense skyrocketed, enough to withstand daggers and ordinary cold weapons. But when facing bullets from an assault rifle or machine gun, the kind that could pierce through 8 or 9 millimeters of steel, his semi-metallic body still couldn't take it. A single hit would punch right through him. Perhaps if his ability continued to level up, he wouldn't fear bullets in the future. But the prerequisite was that he had to survive today. In this life-or-death moment, Bai Binghai unleashed potential far beyond his normal state. The distance between him and the mobile base was only about 17 or 18 meters. Even carrying a steel pillar weighing 500 or 600 kilograms, he closed the gap almost instantly. At this moment, I had just finished dealing with Bai Zhanshan at the rear and was swinging my gun back toward the front of the cabin. It was exactly in those brief 1 or 2 seconds when I shifted my aim that Bai Binghai grasped his only opportunity. He knew perfectly well that this was the final moment to turn the tables, a chance his brother had bought with his life. Die! Bai Binghai roared, his body launching powerfully into the air. I was just about to aim and fire when he closed in right in front of the mobile base, slipping under the vehicle's firing angle. Even though my firepower could cover 360 degrees, there was still a blind spot within about 2 meters of the vehicle's body, where bullets would be blocked by the car itself. Watch out! I yelled. But before the words even left my mouth, Bai Binghai unleashed his strongest attack, pouring all his strength into a single strike. The compressed air I had built up earlier was useless now, and he had already bypassed the mobile base's spikes. His body stretched out like an eagle spreading its wings, his spine arching like a drawn bow. The force from his legs transferred through his waist and exploded into his arms. The steel pillar, carrying his terrifying strength, smashed straight down onto the windshield. Boom! The windshield shook violently. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Countless tiny shards of glass exploded into the air, reflecting light like thousands of water droplets shattering on a lake's surface. Bulletproof glass can withstand gunfire, but every time it takes a hit, it cracks layer by layer. The more it gets shot, the thinner it gets. Bai Binghai's strike with the steel pillar right now far exceeded the power of a standard bullet. A shower of large glass shards rained down into the cabin. The windshield was completely shattered. Inside the vehicle, Rin Shiyu's face went pale. Sun Kuan and Zhang Hai immediately racked their guns. Ing had managed to jump out of the driver's seat just in time. The steel pillar stabbed straight into the seat, nearly piercing right through it. Ing was lucky to escape. Thanks to the Star Seed's control, the seatbelt retracted in a split second, allowing her to spring out of the chair. If it had been an ordinary person, the seatbelt would have held them tight, and they would have definitely been pinned in place. Die, all of you! Seeing his strike shatter the windshield, Bai Binghai roared, using the steel pillar to pry forcefully, causing more large chunks of bulletproof glass to break and fall. He prepared to charge straight into the mobile base. Right at that moment, Ing reacted with lightning speed, lunging in front of the driver's seat and gripping the steel pillar tightly. A 1,000-volt electric current erupted, shooting out brilliant blue light. The powerful surge of electricity channeled straight into Bai Binghai's body. He groaned in agony, almost letting go. His metallic body could resist swords and knives, even small caliber pistol bullets. But an electric shock was different. The electrical resistance made the damage caused by the current even more devastating. Blue arcs of electricity shot all over his body. His hair stood on end, and his clothes began to catch fire. But he still gritted his teeth and held tightly onto the pillar. "Get lost!" Bai Binghai roared, shoving forward with all his might. Ing couldn't dodge in time. Her small hands were painfully knocked back, her wrists nearly dislocated. His strength was simply too terrifying. It wasn't hard to see why he was so highly valued in the Lon County Armed Police Base. But even though she was pushed back, Ing didn't retreat. She switched to her other hand, still gripping the steel pillar tightly. The electric current continued to flare. She poured all her strength into paralyzing his body. Almost at the exact same time, the door of the mobile base popped open. Ing leaped out of the vehicle. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Instead, she hooked onto the rearview mirror bracket, her body gliding forward. In her hand was a triangular dagger, thrusting straight toward Bai Binghai's throat. He howled like a madman, his entire body scorched, but he ignored the blade entirely, throwing a straight punch right at Ying's chest. If that punch landed, it would definitely shatter bones and crush flesh. He knew he had been pushed into a corner. His only option was to put his life on the line. Right then, my voice echoed in Ying's mind, telling her to get out of the way. Without hesitation, Ing used the pull from the rearview mirror bracket to retract her body in a split second, simultaneously hurling the triangular dagger with all her might. The dagger shot forward, burying itself straight into Bai Binghai's throat. Almost simultaneously, a gunshot rang out. A bullet from my Type 81 assault rifle flew through the gap where the windshield had been shattered, striking him squarely in the chest. Bai Binghai's body was knocked back as if hit by a sledgehammer. He groaned and fell flat on his back. The bullet didn't pass through him but lodged inside, heavily ravaging his internal organs. Shot in the chest, throat pierced by a dagger, blood sprayed wildly from his artery. His eyes gradually dimmed. He looked toward the mobile base with its shattered windshield, saw me holding the Type 81 assault rifle with a cold smile, and realized that despite his immense strength, once his muscles were paralyzed by the electric shock, his fate had been sealed. Bai Binghai died on the spot. I let out a soft breath. This battle had drained too much of my mental energy. I immediately called Ing back into the vehicle. It was too dangerous outside. Even though most of the people in the trading hall had fled, I couldn't rule out the possibility of someone hiding and waiting to take a cheap shot. More and more, I realized that I needed to quickly enhance my own physical strength. If I kept relying entirely on the mobile base and firepower, the moment the vehicle had an issue, I would be in an incredibly dangerous situation. Ing jumped into the mobile base and slammed the door shut. That terrifying steel pillar was still wedged tightly in the windshield. Ing immediately delivered a decisive roundhouse kick to the end of the pillar. A harsh metallic clang rang out. The pillar, weighing hundreds of kilograms, was kicked away, smashing hard into a concrete wall in the distance, making the entire wall shake violently. By now, the black market's trading hall was in complete chaos. After my mobile base had plowed through and wreaked havoc multiple times, bullet holes covered everything, and shattered glass was everywhere. The ordinary civilians in the market had long since scattered. Stalls had been overturned countless times. The scene looked no different from a place that had just been swept by an army. This black market was essentially completely destroyed after my assault. I tossed the Type 81 assault rifle aside and sat in the driver's seat. Right then, I heard a notification from the star seed echo in my mind. Detected energy from a level 1+ awakened user. Absorb. I immediately confirmed. Compared to mutant beasts, the energy from human awakened users was much weaker. Previously, only the energy from Bloodwolf had given me a noticeable boost. The energy from Parrot wasn't even half of a mutant core. Weaker ones like Yang Qingqing were practically negligible. This time, after killing 2 awakened users whose strength was no less than Bloodwolf's, the amount of energy I gained was clearly much higher. Bai Zhanshan had been blown to pieces, so most of his mutant energy had dissipated, leaving very little behind. But Bai Binghai had been shot to death, so his energy was preserved almost entirely intact. The star seed began absorbing the mutant energy from his corpse. Meanwhile, I started the vehicle and drove a lap around the black market to inspect the area. If there was still anyone hiding with malicious intent, getting out of the car right now would be extremely dangerous. After a lap of searching, I didn't find anyone else, but I did spot Fatty Yuan, who was on his last breath. His entire body was covered in blood, looking like a torn leather sack. Having been sent flying by the shockwave of the air cannon, his bones were broken in countless places. Yet, he still managed to cling to a sliver of life. As my mobile base slowly approached, his eyes filled with despair and terror. He never could have imagined that just coming to the black market to buy supplies would land him in this disaster. Even less could he have imagined that a young man who looked like a student could drive a vehicle and wipe out the entire black market, killing even the Bai brothers. He trembled, stammering as he called out to me, tears streaming down his face. I looked at him coldly for a moment, then opened the car door. I bent down and searched him, pulling a blood-stained mutant core from his pocket. He gasped for air, begging, saying the mutant core and all the mutant beast meat in his car were mine, just hoping to live. The fear of death is human instinct, especially for someone who had just started enjoying power. To him, the apocalypse wasn't hell, it was heaven, a place where he could stand above others. Even with the lack of water, electricity, and food, and constantly facing the risk of death, as long as he had power, it was enough. But when death truly came knocking, he couldn't accept it. Fatty Yuan tried to grab my pant leg, tears and snot mixing together, sweating profusely from both pain and fear. I put the mutant core away, raised my gun, and told him that the mutant beast meat and the core were already mine. I didn't need his charity. With injuries like his, he couldn't survive anyway. A quick death was better than dying slowly in agony. Even before the apocalypse, injuries like this would be very hard to save, let alone now when medicine was practically non-existent. A small wound was enough to cause a fatal infection. If he hadn't been an awakened user, he would have died long ago. He shook his head in despair, but I pulled the trigger. A gunshot rang out. A deceitful, filthy, and lust-filled soul was ended. In this apocalyptic world, there were thousands of souls just like his. The Star Seed issued another notification, detecting energy from a level 1 awakened user, asking if I wanted to absorb it. I nodded to confirm. The harsh environment had quickly changed me. Now, facing blood and death, I was much calmer than in the early days of the apocalypse. In my mind, I started recalculating the assets I had and the next evolutionary direction for the mobile base. This trip to the black market had brought me massive gains. Truly, there was no faster way to get rich than plundering. I returned to the mobile base. I had already sent Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan to handle the refrigerated truck and the SUV. I drove up to the gates of a warehouse and slammed the gas. The spikes on the front of the vehicle tore through the iron gates, completely bending the steel lock out of shape. Behind the gates was a massive food warehouse. Flour, dried vegetables, cooking oil, peanuts, and countless other packaged foods were piled high. Before the apocalypse, this place was Lon County's agricultural market. That was exactly why, after the apocalypse hit, Bai Zhanshan was able to quickly seize it and turn it into his black market base. This warehouse held a massive amount of supplies. Survivor squads from the surrounding areas who came looking for food were all driven to despair when they found everything had been seized. Anyone who dared resist was tortured to death and hung in front of the gates, while those who didn't fight back were allowed to trade. This was Bai Zhanshan's brilliance. Blind plundering only breeds hatred, but a black market helped him build power. He even had the potential to establish a nation. But now, all this food and these supplies belonged to me. Rin Xiu looked at the food warehouse, her eyes trembling slightly, unable to hide her shock. She understood better than anyone just how much a massive stockpile of supplies like this meant in the apocalypse. Inside the black market warehouse, besides the food, there was also about a ton of mutant beast meat. The Seven God Squad had only kept a very small amount in reserve. They had probably traded most of it for mutant cores earlier. All the supplies in this warehouse, plus the mutant cores, the intact mutant beast Fatty Yuan left behind, the weapons and ammo scattered everywhere, and even the cars my mobile base had flipped, all of it naturally became my squad's property. The only pity was that the cars parked on the outskirts of the black market had been driven off by the other survivor squads. They took their weapons with them too. After all, my strength alone was limited, I couldn't keep everyone in the black market from leaving. Thinking about this mountain of wealth, even Rin Xiu couldn't hide her astonishment. That amount of resources was enough to serve as the foundation to build a faction and sustain it for at least half a year. But the biggest problem was that we couldn't take all this food with us. I stood in front of the food warehouse in silence for a moment, then suddenly told Rin Xiu to get out of the car. She froze slightly at the cold command, struggling to adapt for a second. Before the apocalypse, she was a high and mighty princess. After the apocalypse, even though she lost her status and was even locked in a cage, the way men looked at her was always filled with disgusting lust. My coldness actually surprised her. Finally, Rin Xiu nodded. I had saved her life, so naturally, she would follow my arrangements. After she left, I opened the Star Seeds control panel. I wanted to store as many supplies as possible in the storage space, because in the apocalypse, waste was the greatest sin. But it wasn't convenient to do this in front of Rin Xiu. Right now, I only truly trusted Jiang Zhuiying and Ying, who was directly linked to my consciousness. To hold this massive amount of supplies, I had to upgrade the mobile base's storage space. Now, I had mutant energy from awakened users and mutant cores, fully meeting the requirements for an upgrade. I read the requirements displayed on the control panel. Upgrading from 10 cubic meters to 20 required 1 level 1 mutant core. 30 cubic meters required 2. 40 cubic meters required 3. Each upgrade added 10 cubic meters, but the number of mutant cores consumed increased following a familiar pattern. 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. I was a bit surprised. This was the Fibonacci sequence, a famous and miraculous mathematical pattern. The ratio between consecutive numbers grew closer and closer to the golden ratio. This sequence exists everywhere in nature, from the number of petals on a flower, to the branches of a tree, the spiral of a seashell, and even the structure of the human body. It seemed that from the very moment the universe was formed, this sequence had become a fundamental law. Even the upgrades of the mysterious star seed followed this law. But for me, this wasn't exactly good news. The Fibonacci sequence grows exponentially, which meant the mobile base's storage space could only be upgraded to a certain limit, maybe 1 or 200 cubic meters at most. Beyond that, I wouldn't be able to afford the cost. Even so, 100 cubic meters in the apocalypse was already a massive number, enough to hold hundreds of tons of food. I placed the mutant core fatty yuan left behind into the control slot. Combined with the mutant energy I had absorbed earlier, it totaled the equivalent of 3 mutant cores. However, I couldn't bear to use it all on the storage space. The mobile base had many other areas that needed mutant cores more, from the tires and bulletproof glass to the living space inside. Looking back at the supply warehouse, I estimated that if I only upgraded once, I could still take about 70% of it. 70% it is, then. Safety is still more important than wealth. With that thought, I confirmed the upgrade. The star seed immediately responded. Activated level 2 storage space with a capacity of 20 cubic meters. Sterile and oxygen-free environment. Standard food can be preserved for over a year and a half. Mutant beast meat for up to 4 years. Compared to before, the preservation time had been significantly extended. In the apocalypse, a mobile storage space like this was truly invaluable. The upgrade process took about an hour and didn't affect the use of the vehicle. While waiting, I had Sun Kuan and Zhang Hai go collect the scattered supplies. The people I killed were all carrying guns. After gathering them up, we acquired 3 automatic rifles, 1 submachine gun, and even the Type 95 light machine gun I had previously sold to Bai Zhanshan. Looking at that pile of weapons, I chuckled. The things I had sold had come right back to me. I could even sell them again. While the star seed was upgrading, I checked the condition of the mobile base. The front windshield was completely shattered, and the vehicle's armor and tires had sustained minor damage. Repairs would only take an hour or 2. Materials, gas, and electricity weren't an issue. But this battle also made me realize that the mobile base's current strength still wasn't enough. The bulletproof glass and tires were clearly weak points. If Bai Binghai had shattered the windshield earlier while there were still many gunmen who hadn't fled, a concentrated barrage would have broken the entire pane very quickly. Then, the people inside the vehicle would have had to face the hail of bullets directly. With my current physique, taking just one hit would definitely result in a tragic end. Thinking of this, I frowned. I didn't want my life to depend on luck or meaningless coincidences. If possible, I even wanted to replace all the materials of the mobile base with level 1 alloy, like the kind used for the ramming spikes. But right now, I clearly didn't have the means. I'll upgrade the bulletproof glass first, I told myself, then decided to consume 1 unit of mutant energy to reinforce the bulletproof glass. As for the mutant core taken from Fatty Yuan, after careful consideration, I chose to use it to synthesize gene evolution fluid. Only mutant cores met the requirements for the biological lab, while the mutant energy obtained from awakened users could only be used to upgrade the mobile base. The biological lab's control panel appeared before my eyes. After the mobile base's second evolution, the lab's interface had also changed significantly. Previously, it could only synthesize gene evolution fluids to enhance defense, strength, agility, neural reflexes, and the brain. But now, larger categories had appeared. The first category was physical enhancement. When I opened it, all the fluids related to strength, defense, and physique were grouped here. It came with a panel displaying my current physical status: Strength 1.0, Agility 1.1, Physique 1.0, Defense 0.9, Mental Strength 1.1, Viral Immunity 1.1, Brain 3.1. I couldn't help but be surprised. A stat of 1.0 represented an ordinary person, which meant my body was currently still at an average level. A viral immunity of 1.1 was probably why I survived the initial outbreak. As for the brain stat of 3.1, that was clearly thanks to the gene evolution fluid I had used before. Right now, my brain's processing speed was 3 times faster than an ordinary person's, exactly matching the starting level of the brain fluid in the lab. These physical enhancement options were very tempting, but I didn't rush to decide. I continued looking at the other major categories the level 2 mobile base had unlocked. The second category was matter and energy control. When I opened it, all my stats in this section were 0. Below were options like wind, fire, ice, and lightning. Among them, lightning was exactly Jiang Zhuiying's ability. But to activate this control system, it required at least 1 level 2 mutant core. That forced me to stop. Right now, I hadn't even encountered a level 2 mutant beast, let alone possess their cores. Higher level abilities like metal control or gravity control required several level 2 mutant cores. I could only look and sigh. Control type abilities were truly too expensive. Jiang Zhuiying was really lucky to possess an ability that the star seed valued far higher than mere physical enhancement. Leaving that section, the third major category appeared: bloodline activation. This category allowed the host to acquire a special bloodline, like the werewolf or bearman bloodlines, the kind I had seen in Blood Wolf and by Zhan Shan. A single transformation could grant overwhelming strength, speed, and defense. But the bloodlines provided by the star seed were different. They didn't require transformation. Instead, they integrated the bloodline directly into my body. This allowed me to possess physical abilities equivalent to a werewolf or bearman while remaining in human form. Among the many bloodline options, one made me pause: blood evolution bloodline. Curious, I opened the description and quickly understood. According to the star seed, humans inherently possessed incredibly strong blood and bone marrow genes, but these genes were sealed. Before the apocalypse, some people accidentally activated a portion of these genes. But due to the lack of mutant energy and viral stimulation, the activation backfired, leading to premature death. In medicine, this condition was called porphyria, also known as the vampire disease. I had heard of this illness before, and perhaps the Western legends of vampires originated from it. Sufferers feared sunlight. UV rays caused the porphyrins in their skin to convert into toxins, causing severe burns. They craved blood because they needed hemoglobin. Their gums receded, their skin turned pale, and their teeth protruded like animal fangs. But with enough mutant energy and the virus modifying their cells, their genes and bone marrow would be properly nourished, turning them into true evolvers. Then, they would no longer fear sunlight, but instead possess overwhelming strength. Blood is a miraculous tissue, making up about 7 to 8% of body weight. Every living cell depends on blood. If you connected all the blood vessels in the human body, the total length could reach 100,000 kilometers, enough to wrap around the Earth more than twice. If the circulatory system was strong enough to supply every single cell, the human body would completely transform. The heart, only the size of a fist, can pump enough blood in a single day to fill an entire oil tanker train car, working tirelessly for a lifetime thanks to its special coronary circulation system. Human muscles get tired not because the cells can't handle it, but because waste products accumulate and the supply of oxygen and energy is insufficient. If everything was supplied as perfectly as the heart muscle, any muscle could work for long periods without exhaustion. If the entire body was nourished like that, strength, speed, stamina, recovery, immunity, and even lifespan would skyrocket. This was the essence of the blood evolution bloodline, an evolutionary path aimed at creating a powerful, enduring, and near-immortal body. After reading the starseed's description, I understood that the mutant bloodline wasn't exactly like the creatures in movies, like vampires. It was just that the outward manifestations had a few similarities. Simply put, it was a stronger blood circulatory system that allowed mutated blood cells to transport oxygen, nutrients, and energy more efficiently. When the circulatory system was strengthened, digestive capacity would also increase. This meant I could eat more mutant beast meat or use evolution crystals to increase my strength faster. If I activated the mutant bloodline, not only would my survivability significantly improve, but my future strength growth rate would also be faster. It was just that the amount of evolution crystals consumed would also be higher. For an ordinary person, it would be hard to bear, but with the star seed, this wasn't an issue. I carefully weighed the pros and cons, but it all depended on whether I had a level 2 mutant core in hand. Right now, I only had exactly one level 1 mutant core. Too little to plan that far ahead. I might as well use it to synthesize a dose of agility-type gene evolution fluid first. With that thought, I tossed the mutant core into the biological lab. My neural reflexes were already quite fast, but my movement speed was still slow. Reaching an agility level 3 times that of an ordinary person would be a much-needed addition. The lab notified me that the gene fluid was being synthesized, with a completion time of 1 hour. In just a short moment, the mutant energy and mutant cores I had obtained from the black market were almost entirely used up. Now, only one mutant core remained. I kept it to modify the mining dump truck. Over 95% of the squad's resources were concentrated on me. I held the mutant cores. Most of the weapons were also traded for mutant cores. The other members only ate a little mutant beast meat. I was the pillar of the squad, but in every operation, Jiang Zhuiying also contributed greatly. Therefore, I always had to ensure my sister could develop well. Just wait a few more days. Right now, Jiang Zhuiying could only eat mutant beast meat, and her intake was limited. What truly suited her were the evolution crystals extracted by the military, but we couldn't buy them right now. Fortunately, if the mobile base's energy extraction lab was completed, I could extract evolution crystals for Jiang Zhuiying to use myself. Thinking of this, I felt a bit guilty. These past few days, she had always followed me to the most dangerous places without ever complaining. That only urged me to get stronger faster, because only when I was strong enough could I pull Jiang Zhuiying along on this path. Brother, should we fix the car now? Jiang Zhuiying put down her iPad and stretched comfortably. Sun Kuan, Zhang Hai, and even Rin Xiu had all been sent out of the vehicle by me. The car had heating, so Jiang Zhuiying was only wearing a cool tank top. Her stretching revealed her fair, smooth waist, brimming with youthful vitality. I smiled and told her to start the repairs. Fixing the car required electricity, and Jiang Zhuiying was the best power source. With the food and mutant beast meat in the warehouse, I didn't hide it from my sister. I directly activated the auto collection mode, pulling it all into the storage space. Ever since I revealed my mechanical modification ability, the mobile base's abnormal phenomena no longer surprised Jiang Zhuiying. Maybe I had a few secrets, but she didn't mind. As long as her brother was strong enough, that was all that mattered. Jiang Zhuiying happily ran over to the battery system, starting to charge it and assist with the car repairs. For her, this was also a form of training. Meanwhile, the black market's food warehouse was absorbed by the storage space at a very fast rate. In less than 10 minutes, the newly expanded 10 cubic meters of space was filled with food and mutant beast meat. By the time the mobile base was repaired, The gene evolution fluid was finished, the bulletproof glass was upgraded, and the battlefield had been swept clean. All the weapons, ammo, bullet-riddled ballistic shields, and armor on the corpses had been stripped clean by Sun Quan and Zhang Hai. Because in this era, no one cared who they used to belong to. If they had holes, they'd just sell them cheaper. Everything was ready. At dusk, our squad rested for a moment, then set off. A minibus, a refrigerated truck, and an SUV left the black market in a convoy. After driving about 20 or 30 kilometers, it got completely dark. The convoy stopped in a wasteland. Hot mutant beast meat stew, plus grilled meat, dried vegetables, and freshly cooked rice. It was an incredibly lavish dinner in the cold night. Drinking a bowl of hot soup, a comforting feeling spread through the body, washing away the fatigue from the intense battles. If we could take a hot shower too, it would be absolutely perfect. This privilege was reserved only for me, Jiang Zhuiying, and Ing. Sun Quan and Zhang Hai had barely bathed since the apocalypse began. You could probably scrape half a pound of dirt off them. So they didn't want to squeeze into the small bathroom. Instead, they found a nearby stream and jumped in to wash up to their heart's content. Rin Xiyu was different. She watched Jiang Zhuiying step out of the bathroom, her hair still wet and steam rising from her head, her eyes full of admiration. Taking a hot shower in the middle of the apocalypse, using electricity to boil water. Perhaps only on this vehicle did such luxury exist. Being a girl, and a fastidious one at that, Rin Xiyu couldn't stand the feeling of being dirty. But opening her mouth to ask to use my bathroom made her very embarrassed. After hesitating for a long time, she finally blushed and asked if she could use the bathroom, her hands gripping the edge of her skirt, her eyes full of hope. I replied that it was fine, very casually. She breathed a sigh of relief, stepped into the bathroom, and carefully closed the door. Hot water cascaded down, and warm steam enveloped her face. In that small, narrow space, a sense of happiness she hadn't felt in a long time returned. Sometimes, true happiness is very simple. When you're hungry, you have food. When you're dirty, you have a place to bathe. Before the apocalypse, material wealth was abundant, yet people weren't happy. But now, in this world of scarcity, for the first time, Rin Xiyu felt that perhaps the apocalypse wasn't entirely as bad as she had once thought. Rin Xiyu finished her shower. She carefully washed her dirty clothes, even neatly putting her underwear away. Never in a million years did she think she'd be bathing in the home of a man she'd known for barely a day. He was right outside the door, close enough to hear the water running while she showered. Now that she was done, alongside the embarrassment, a strange, indescribable feeling welled up inside her. But she didn't have any clean clothes to change into. She had no choice but to borrow Zhu Ying's clean pajamas, a cartoon teddy bear set that completely clashed with her usual style. She had no idea how she looked in them. As she gently pushed open the bathroom door, her fragile, petite figure appeared right in front of me. Already frail and slender, wearing those teddy bear pajamas made her look like a 15 or 16-year-old girl, innocent and adorable. Stepping out of the bathroom, Rin Xiyu instinctively glanced my way. I was just wearing a tight tank top. Thanks to my regular diet of mutant beast meat, my muscles had grown incredibly solid. Even under the shirt, the sharp, chiseled lines of my body were clearly visible, exuding a raw sense of power. But I completely ignored her gaze. All my attention was locked onto my hands. I held 6 coins in my hands. They were flying up and down at an unbelievable speed, spinning through the air and catching the light in a dazzling blur. Rin Xiyu stood frozen in place. She probably never imagined someone could move with such terrifying speed and precision. Watching my fingers move, it felt like she was watching a magic trick. Her eyes couldn't even track my hand speed. The 6 coins danced relentlessly, clinking against each other in midair without a single one dropping. My long, nimble fingers moved as if imbued with some miraculous power. After 4 or 5 consecutive tricks, all 6 coins dropped onto the small table in front of me. Clack, 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 landing in a perfectly neat stack. I let out a long breath. That was just a warm-up for hand dexterity. After drinking the agility genetic evolution fluid, my body's flexibility had shot up drastically. I needed time to adapt to these new changes. Having an agile body and razor-sharp reflexes allowed me to pull off stunts that would leave anyone speechless. Awakened users didn't just get stronger by eating mutant meat or absorbing evolution crystals. They had to train relentlessly, too. Having raw power without knowing how to wield it just made you a clumsy giant. Beside me, Zhu Ying held her phone, excitedly recording the whole thing. She giggled and told me my moves looked insanely cool. Ever since we reunited, Zhu Ying felt like miracles were happening one after another. She could clearly feel it. I was getting stronger by the day. When we first met again, I looked like an average guy. But now, put a gun in my hand, and I could wipe out an entire squad all by myself. I told her to cut the recording and called it a day for training. Then, I reminded Zhu Ying to stop binge-watching anime all day and spend her free time practicing her electricity control. She just stuck her tongue out playfully, acting innocent, but I knew she'd gotten a bit too relaxed hanging around me lately. We needed a good night's rest tonight. The road to Jinling Port was bound to be filled with brutal battles. Thinking about resting gave me a headache. The mobile base only had one folding single bed. Back when it was just me and Zhu Ying, she'd take the bed and I'd take the sofa. But this morning, with Ying and Ren Xiu joining the team, even the sofa was taken. Out of the other vehicles, only the refrigerated truck and the bus were viable for sleeping. The SUV's defenses were too weak. Even Sun Kuan didn't dare sleep in it overnight. The refrigerated truck's cabin was already packed with Sun Kuan and Zhang Hai. Obviously, I couldn't have Ren Xiu squeezing in there with two grown men, so her only option was the bus. I thought to myself, if only I could expand the base vehicle's space. But every expansion cost an evolution crystal. Right now, I was so broke I wished I could split one crystal in half to use. I couldn't justify wasting one just for comfort. Everyone would just have to deal with the cramped space for a while longer. Ren Xiu was very perceptive and quickly caught onto the problem. Hugging her knees to her chest, she said she wouldn't mind sleeping on the floor. In truth, I knew exactly why she was acting like this. She wasn't wearing any underwear. She could borrow clothes from Zhu Ying, but not intimates. Panties could be blow-dried, but a bra wasn't so easy. So, she had to go braless beneath those baggy teddy bear pajamas. It wasn't noticeable at a glance, but having me stare at her still made her blush uncontrollably. I stepped up and offered to take the floor. The bus floor was clean and warm. Throwing down a blanket would make it just as good as a bed. Deep down, I just didn't feel right making a petite girl like Ren Xiu sleep on the floor. Right then, Zhu Ying giggled, teasing that I hadn't grasped the real problem. One on the bed, one on the sofa. That left two people for the floor. Even if I slept on the floor, I still had to pick someone to sleep down there with me. Then, she mischievously asked if I was choosing Ying or Sister Ren. Hearing that, Ren Xiu's face instantly flushed crimson. She stole a glance at Ying, wondering how the cold, fierce woman would react. Meanwhile, I looked down at the floor. The bus didn't have much square footage to begin with. The back held the bathroom, toilet, and a small storage room. The bedroom was on the side, and the kitchen was up front. The living room was right next to the bedroom, and with the sofa taking up space, the remaining floor area was extremely limited. Two people sleeping on the floor would be so cramped it'd basically be like sharing a standard bed. The thought of sleeping next to a beautiful woman made my heart skip a beat. There were 3 gorgeous girls on this bus. Wait, no, one of them is my little sister. So that leaves 2. And I was the only guy? Whether on the sofa or the floor, the proximity was so close it was impossible not to let your imagination run wild. Virum. Out on the main road, dozens of zombies charged at us. But with a few heavy thuds, bam, bam, bam. The lead bus barreled right through, sending several zombies flying and effortlessly punching a hole through the scattered horde. Behind it was the SUV, followed by the refrigerated truck. This was my convoy. After a night of rest, the team had fully recovered their strength and immediately set out for Jinling Port, the largest port in the central region. The fastest route required cutting straight through Jinling City. But that meant entering an area that once had an insanely high population density. And in the apocalypse, that meant only one thing: an endless sea of zombies. Even though my mobile base had undergone several evolutions, I didn't dare risk cutting through downtown. No matter how tough the base was, handling a few hundred zombies was its absolute limit. If we ran into thousands, or tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, Getting bogged down in a zombie tide would immobilize the vehicles. It would be certain death. So, that route was completely off the table. If we had to detour, this was the shortest path. But to guarantee we'd arrive by nightfall, we still had to pass through a certain stretch of road. Sun Kuan, a Jinling local, pointed at his tablet and showed me the map. I've carefully calculated this route. It bypasses heavily populated areas and major bottlenecks where vehicles would easily get trapped. I pondered for a moment and nodded. Then we take this path. If we take a detour, we'll definitely have to stop and camp for the night near Jinling, and the night is full of unpredictable dangers. Besides, now that my abilities, physical stats, and the base vehicle have all been upgraded, I feel a lot more confident than before. It's just the outskirts of the city anyway. It wouldn't hurt to give it a shot. Hearing this, Sun Kuan's eyes lit up. Just the thought of cutting through the city got his adrenaline pumping. Normally, other teams would do anything to avoid zombies, but here we were, actively charging straight into them. Brother Jiang, here's some tea. A slender, soft hand extended a teacup toward me. I looked up at Rin Shiyu, took the cup, and thanked her. She lowered her head in response, not daring to meet my eyes. She had changed back into her own clothes and was sitting gracefully on the sofa, looking absolutely picture-perfect. As she leaned forward to pour the tea, her slender neck looked as elegant as a swan's. Her noble and sophisticated aura was undeniable, save for her slightly flushed hands. Sun Kuan glanced at me, then at Rin Shiyu, and finally at Ying, who was driving, before thoughtfully stroking his chin. The heavy atmosphere naturally set his imagination running wild. Sensing his gaze, Rin Shiyu buried her head even lower. At the thought of last night, her ears started burning all over again. Last night, before I could even figure out the sleeping arrangements, Ying had walked right over and crashed straight onto the sofa. I had simply shrugged and said, "Guess it's bedtime then." Since the sofa was taken, there was no point overthinking it. Where I slept didn't make much of a difference to me anyway. Rin Shiyu had hesitated, opening her mouth, but biting back her words. She couldn't exactly waking up, nor did she have any right to. In the end, she could only tightly wrap herself in her blanket, pressing her back against the corner wall in a desperate attempt to keep her distance from me. But the floor space was only so big. No matter how much she tried to shrink away, it was useless. She could clearly hear my breathing and feel the warmth radiating from my body. As for me, lying between two women with completely contrasting charms, I'd be lying if I said my heart didn't flutter a bit. But after a grueling day of fighting, I was mentally drained, and it didn't take long for me to drift off to sleep. Ying was out cold, and Zhu Ying was breathing softly in her sleep. Only Rin Shiyu tossed and turned for a while, staring at the ceiling of the vehicle before finally succumbing to exhaustion and drifting off. After days of starving and tossing in fear, having a full stomach and a warm, safe place to sleep made her fall into a deep slumber. It was the first time in her life sharing a room with a man. Even though she tried to act nonchalant about it now, she couldn't help but feel incredibly shy as the convoy pressed onward. The route Sun Kuan picked was fairly clear. Any small cars blocking our path were easily rammed aside by the bus, and it only took a little extra effort when we encountered large trucks. But as we pushed deeper into the inevitable city sector, the zombie headcount began to spike drastically. Sun Kuan went back to the SUV, leaving Zhu Ying to take his place on the bus to deal with the incoming zombies. Ammunition was far too precious. If we could avoid using guns, we would. Inside the safe confines of the combat control room, Zhu Ying could unleash her electrical attacks. After my scolding about her being too playful lately, she had gotten a lot more serious. Arcs of electricity crackled continuously from the front, weaving a blue and white net of lightning right before the windshield. Meanwhile, Ying steered the bus straight ahead, carving through the storm like a juggernaut. The zombies were either charred to a crisp by the currents or paralyzed and sent flying. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the lead bus charged forward like a raging storm. Rin Shiyu watched silently from the sidelines. Even though she had witnessed this scene multiple times, it still left her completely awestruck. Right then, Ying's voice rang out, "Brother Jiang, we've got a situation up ahead." The air instantly grew tense. In the apocalypse, a situation almost always meant danger. I hurried into the cockpit and peered ahead. Normally, the zombies would have rushed us by now. But up ahead, a massive horde had their backs turned to us, frantically tearing at something. 2 gunshots echoed, followed immediately by a blood-curdling scream that cut short after a couple of gasps. It wasn't hard to imagine their grim fate. To think there are survivors out here. This was already the city's edge. Unless absolutely necessary, no one would dare risk coming this close. Soon, the scene came into clear view. To my surprise, these weren't ordinary survivors. It was a squad of 5 or 6 fully equipped soldiers using a military truck as a barricade to make their stand. One look at their stance told me they were highly trained professionals. They only fired at close range, making almost every single bullet count to conserve ammunition, which explained why their shots were so measured and disciplined. Maintaining that kind of composure under the pressure of a swarming horde was no small feat. They had just lost a comrade, but from what I could see, unless they were running dangerously low on ammo, pulling back shouldn't be too difficult for them. What struck me as odd, though, was the sheer terror on their faces. They were breaking out in a cold sweat, clearly terrified of something. Their disciplined combat style completely clashed with the blatant dread written all over their countenances. My initial plan was to bypass them. My goal was to reach Jinling Port, and I didn't want any trouble. But looking at their reaction, I knew I couldn't just brush this off. Let's check out the situation first, I told Ing. In the early stages of the apocalypse, a military squad's combat effectiveness was nothing to scoff at. They were vastly superior to ordinary survivor groups. The fact that they were this panicked immediately set off alarm bells in my head. So, after stopping the vehicles and clearing out the zombies charging at us, I ordered everyone to stay on high alert. Because hidden within that horde, there was likely something far more dangerous. We parked a considerable distance away, and the group of soldiers quickly noticed our arrival. Seeing us, one of the soldiers couldn't hide his relief and eagerly asked his captain if they should signal for help. Their captain was a rugged man in his early 30s with tanned skin, hair drenched in sweat, and palms slick from sheer tension. With just a single glance at my convoy, he quickly sized up our formation. An SUV and a modified vehicle were standard fare. The bus looked unique, likely used as living quarters or storage, while the heavily reinforced refrigerated truck indicated that the team must have at least 2 individuals with special abilities. The refrigerated truck was exceptionally well modified, and the fact that they had made it all the way here proved my team's strength was nothing to scoff at. It would take at least 2 awakened users to manage 3 vehicles at once. Under normal circumstances, they might even have a gun or 2. But against that monster, all of it was completely meaningless. This military squad had been trapped here for a long time. Of the original 20 men, only a handful of survivors remained. Over a dozen elite soldiers had already lost their lives. For a squad like theirs, even if reinforcements arrived, it would just mean marching into a death trap together. The captain glanced back into the distance and saw my convoy parked far away, thinking that the zombie horde alone was probably enough to keep us from approaching. Even if he offered a reward for a rescue, there was no guarantee we'd be willing to take the risk. But then, his eyes wavered slightly as he looked inside their truck cabin. Sitting inside was an old man in civilian clothes. He was in his 60s with snow-white hair, yet his build remained robust and his posture perfectly straight. Even in the face of such extreme danger, his eyes remained calm and steady, betraying no sign of fear. Seated beside him was a young girl around 15 or 16 years old. She was desperately trying to put on a brave face, but every time a gunshot echoed, she would instinctively clutch the hem of her shirt, her body trembling slightly as absolute terror filled her eyes. Even though she tried to act tough, she was still just a teenage girl who had just witnessed over a dozen soldiers get dragged away by zombies. Her heart was consumed by sheer terror, knowing all too well that it wouldn't be long before she and the old man met the exact same fate. The thought made her turn even paler. She would rather shoot herself than fall into the hands of those monsters. The old man beside her wasn't afraid of death, but every time he glanced at his granddaughter, he couldn't hide the heartache in his eyes. It didn't matter if he died, but his granddaughter was far too young and innocent. If they could just break through the horde, maybe they could hand Elder Zhang over to them and then scatter to escape. It would be much easier. But it looked like they couldn't even get past this zombie horde. With no other choice, the captain sighed internally, took another glance at us, and made up his mind. He told his comrades that when the monster appeared next, they had to cover him. He was going to risk it all. Whether he succeeded or failed, it would buy them some time to break out. As he spoke, he yanked at his belt, which was lined with grenades, and quickly rigged all the pins together. A look of grim determination washed over his face. The surrounding soldiers frantically called out to their captain, but he waved them off, cutting them short and saying there was nothing left to discuss. I'm the strongest one here. I'm the only one who stands a chance. Besides, this is a last resort. If I fail and that monster tries to swallow me whole, I'll blow it to hell so it knows I'm no easy meal. Just then, a few zombies in the horde began shifting abnormally. They were terrifyingly agile. If the truck's entrance weren't narrow and heavily reinforced, they wouldn't have lasted this long. Their sudden movement signaled that the monster was making its move. The captain's pupils dilated instantly. He barked in order to get ready. The soldiers had no time for words. Desperately shooting down zombies, they anxiously scanned their surroundings. The monster always hid within the horde, appearing like a ghost each time to suddenly drag someone away. Seeing the soldiers' expressions warp with dread, I focused my gaze on the horde, but on the surface, everything looked normal. So what exactly was making them this terrified? Right at that moment, I caught a glimpse of a dark shadow flitting through the horde. Before I could even process it, a blood-curdling shriek erupted from the military truck. A massive dark shadow burst from the horde, nearly as thick as a water barrel, with 5 or 6 meters of its body exposed. It was lightning fast, snapping its jaws around a soldier and dragging him away in an instant. The heavily built soldier didn't even have a chance to resist. Only then did the remaining men open fire. But no matter how well trained they were, how could they hit a target moving so fast they couldn't even react? Agonized screams echoed as the soldier was dragged through the air, struggling wildly before being pulled back into the horde a split second later. The captain's eyes widened. Once again, they had failed to react in time. Grabbing the vehicle's door shield, he prepared to charge out, shouting for cover and swearing to take the monster down with him. The dark shadow moved too fast for Zhu Ying and the others to see clearly. But I saw it. With my brain control ability activated, that fleeting movement replayed before my eyes in slow motion. It was a mutant python, as thick as a water barrel. Its entire body was covered in thick scales. Just by looking at the way the zombies were forced aside, I estimated it was over 10 meters long. A colossal body like that, yet its speed was mind-boggling. At the same time, the system provided an assessment of its power, level 1+ mutant, currently evolving. Hearing level 1+, I was a bit disappointed since I still hadn't seen any trace of a level 2 mutant. But a moment later, when it added that the python was currently evolving, my eyes instantly lit up. The system explained that an evolving state meant the python's mutant energy was transitioning from level 1+ to level 2. It had devoured a massive number of humans, including awakened users, pushing its accumulated energy to the brink of a breakthrough. I never expected that despite not having encountered a level 2 mutant beast yet, I'd stumble upon one mid-evolution. Talk about a stroke of luck. This mutant python was about to break through to level 2, making it exceptionally dangerous. Its speed ensured that almost every strike hit its mark, making it near impossible to shoot. The soldier it dragged away had drawn his knife, stabbing wildly in a desperate struggle, but he couldn't pierce its thick scales at all. That alone showed how insane its defense was. If it actually successfully evolved to level 2 and stabilized its form, its speed would undoubtedly become even more terrifying. Right now, I was in desperate need of mutant crystals, especially a level 2 crystal. My craving for one was almost unbearable. I watched the python drag its prey, moving rapidly through the zombie horde. It would likely hide inside one of the surrounding buildings to feed before continuing its hunt. Once it slipped indoors, I'd have no way to deal with it, and who knew what state it would be in when it reemerged. Accelerate. Ram through. I ordered immediately, and gave a brief response and slammed on the gas. The transit vehicle, which had been idling in preparation, roared to life and charged straight into the zombie horde. The military captain also realized his speed could never match the python's. Even if he jumped down, he would only be throwing himself into a sea of zombies while the python remained too far out of reach. Despair began to set in among the remaining few. If he didn't risk it, even if it meant just throwing grenades to trigger a blast, and by time, he had to try. It might be their only shot. Right at that moment, a roaring vroom echoed, sounding like a sports car blasting past at close range. The captain froze, instinctively looking toward the source of the noise. The other soldiers were startled too. Before their very eyes, the distant transit vehicle suddenly tore straight into the zombie horde, its engine roaring furiously. Along its path, zombies were sent flying like bowling pins. A light graze meant death. A direct hit sent them soaring. This vehicle is a beast, the captain gasped, only now realizing that the transit vehicle was actually a heavily modified combat machine. Before this, he had assumed it was just used for transport or living quarters. But what were the transit vehicle and the people on it trying to do? Are they insane? They're trying to hunt the mutant python. They're hunting the mutant python? A soldier gasped, his eyes wide. One look at this python was enough to know how terrifying it was. Even this military squad wouldn't have dared to provoke it if they had witnessed its horrifying speed from the start. Yet now, those survivors, despite having witnessed the python's horror firsthand, had decisively charged in any way. The captain and his soldiers couldn't help but feel they were being overconfident, even reckless. Against absolute speed, raw power is hard to utilize, let alone in the middle of a sea of zombies. However, as the transit vehicle drew closer and closer, everyone's hearts couldn't help but tighten, their eyes glued to it. The captain, who had been prepared to fight to the death, along with the remaining soldiers, felt a deep sense of despair. Even if they bought a little more time, they weren't sure they could escape. But now, watching the vehicle roar through the zombie horde, a surge of adrenaline and a glimmer of hope rose within them despite the slim odds. The grandfather and granddaughter inside the military truck saw this too, a fierce longing for survival flaring up in their eyes. I obviously knew the mutant python was fast, but I had no intention of a head-on clash. The transit vehicle continuously activated its speed boost and ramming skills, pushing its velocity to the absolute limit. Combined with my brain's analytical capacity, I easily predicted the python's movement trajectory. Instead of charging straight at it, I aimed for a point ahead of its path. The transit vehicle roared forward, slamming directly into the mutant python's head. Boom! The violent impact shook the entire vehicle. I instantly bellowed, "Zhuing!" The python's scales were incredibly tough. The ram didn't cause any surface damage, but the massive high-speed impact left it deeply concussed and dazed inside. Before it could recover, dozens of lightning bolts rained down, weaving into an electrical grid that completely enveloped its head. The mutant python reared up amidst the flashing currents. For the first time, its true form was fully revealed to everyone. It had a flattened, triangular head and a wide-open maw, its flicking tongue letting out a piercing hiss. Its massive, barrel-thick body, stretching over 10 meters long, thrashed violently within the electrical net, each sweep pulverizing dozens of surrounding zombies. Right before the electrical grid could dissipate, a sudden gunshot rang out. Boom! One of the mutant python's eyes exploded, splattering blood and bone shards everywhere. It let out a violent hiss as its massive tail swept across, crushing a roadside sedan into a heap of scrap metal. From the moment the transit vehicle collided with the python to the sedan being pulverized, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Only when the echoes finally settled did the soldiers snap back to reality. Their eyes were wide, utterly unable to believe the sight before them. Though they had secretly hoped the transit vehicle could pull something off, or even dreamed it might kill the python, realistically, they only expected it to cause enough of a distraction to buy them time to escape. The captain was shocked to his very core. If the vehicle had merely stalled the python for a brief moment, he wouldn't have been surprised. Despite thinking this group was reckless, he assumed they had an ace up their sleeve. But the sheer horror of that python far exceeded anyone's imagination. Yet, against all odds, the transit vehicle had struck with terrifying power and unbelievable precision, slamming dead-on into the mutant python. The initial crash was one thing, but our relentless, follow-up onslaught was what truly left the captain speechless. Everything happened so seamlessly, unfolding in such rapid succession that the mutant python had zero time to react. Especially that marksmanship. When the mutant python went berserk, it thrashed its head with blinding speed. Even though Zhu Ying's electrical currents had managed to slow it down a fraction, it was barely a dent in its velocity. The python's body was so colossal that the electricity could only paralyze it for a split second. The captain knew that if he were in that position, he might have been able to hit the snake's head, but landing a shot clean in the eye was practically impossible, especially in such a tight window, without even a single second to aim. He looked toward the transit vehicle and saw that the shooter was just a young man who didn't even look 20, holding a Type 81 assault rifle. He looked like an undergraduate student who hadn't even graduated yet. How could anyone shoot with that level of precision? And right at that moment, the young man fired again. The python's remaining eye exploded, spraying blood everywhere. The captain's eyes twitched. He was profoundly shaken. You could chalk the first shot up to sheer luck, but the second one? Absolutely not. The grandfather and granddaughter inside the military truck also stared in stunned silence. The girl's eyes were wide with utter disbelief. The gargantuan mutant python that had just driven them to the brink of death, leaving them to wait in absolute despair, was now being completely suppressed and brutally battered. Is this really the same python? The captain wondered in sheer awe. Everything happened so fast, so seamlessly, without a single hesitation or mistake. Especially those two critical shots. With just 2 bullets, the python's eyes were completely destroyed. The eyes were its only weakness, as its steel-hard scales were virtually impervious to gunfire. 2 7.62mm rounds fired at close range would have blown a human head to pieces. No matter how tough this python was, it couldn't just shrug off such a fatal blow. Meanwhile, I maintained my composure, showing no trace of anxiety. I had charged in to strike the python with overwhelming, lightning-fast force, denying it any chance to counterattack. If it were allowed to fully utilize its speed and power, even I would be in serious trouble. Not to mention the transit vehicle had just been repaired. I had no desire to fix it all over again. But right at that moment, the captain's heart sank. The mutant python wasn't dead yet. In its agonizing pain, it writhed its body wildly, snapping its jaws shut and biting a zombie completely in half. Its massive frame thrashed violently, snapping the bones of dozens of other zombies, sending them flying through the air to hit the ground like heavy sandbags. At that horrific sight, the girl's face drained of all color, and even the soldiers instinctively stepped back. Faced with a monster dozens of meters long, they looked pitifully small. Before the apocalypse, an Amazonian anaconda was terrifying enough at 8 or even 10 meters long, weighing over 200 kilograms and capable of swallowing crocodiles whole. But this mutant python was well over 10 meters long, with a hideous, triangular head that looked riddled with deadly toxins. The zombie it bit in half tore apart, its rotting flesh emitting a foul, pungent stench. "Fall back," I ordered. Ying's ice-cold face remained entirely expressionless. She immediately threw the transit vehicle into reverse, backing up several dozen meters. Once we gained enough distance, I barked the next command: ram it to death. The python had exhausted its strength. Though it still looked ferocious, this was the exact moment it was at its weakest. Right then, the system alerted me that the mutant python had completed its evolution. It had become a level 2 mutant beast. Driven to a breakthrough by its critical injuries, it was now a level 2 threat, making this moment both its most dangerous and its most vulnerable. Shrink. From the front of the transit vehicle, a sharp metal ram suddenly extended. In a fraction of a second, the vehicle accelerated past 100 kilometers per hour, charging straight at the raging python. The captain and his soldiers stood frozen. This vehicle was brilliantly modified. The high-tech look of that metal-battering ram instantly brought to mind the U.S. Marine Corps' M1 assault breacher vehicle. Of course, it wasn't a perfect comparison, but for a standard transit vehicle, this level of modification was mind-blowing. Even so, charging head-on into the mutant python still felt like throwing an egg against a rock. The python thrashed, tearing up the roadside planters and snapping a utility pole clean in half. Before the captain could think any further, the transit vehicle slammed violently into the python's midsection. Boom! A thunderous crash echoed as the vehicle was violently jolted sideways, causing the young girl inside the military truck to shriek in terror. A series of heavy thuds followed as the transit vehicle plowed through the surrounding zombies. Shaking off the impact, Rin Xiu scrambled to sit upright and peered out the window. Though the transit vehicle took a heavy jolt, the mutant python got the worst of it. The metal battering ram had driven deep into its torso, caving in a massive section of its steel-like scales as thick torrents of blood gushed out. The python continued to hiss and flail, but its speed and power had drastically waned. Wasting no time, I raised my rifle, aimed straight at its blood-drenched head, and pulled the trigger. Bang! Blood sprayed everywhere as its massive head crashed heavily to the ground. The python gave a few final, weak twitches before going completely still. The soldiers watched on with bated breath. Even when they were absolutely certain the python was dead, they still couldn't wrap their heads around it. One of the soldiers went completely limp, collapsing from sheer exhaustion. "We've still got zombies," the captain bellowed, snapping everyone back to reality. The whiplash of going from the brink of death to absolute victory was so sudden it left them completely shell-shocked. "Grandpa, we don't have to die anymore," the girl choked out, turning to the old man as tears finally spilled from her rimmed eyes. The old man nodded silently, his gaze fixed on the transit vehicle. Compared to the colossal python, the vehicle still looked quite small. Yet, it and the people inside had completely eradicated that terrifying monster with absolute finality. The cold gleam of the metal ram, still drenched in the mutant python's dark blood, exuded a terrifyingly imposing aura that left everyone in awe. Watching the mutant python lie completely motionless, I let out a soft sigh of relief. This monster's vitality was truly absurd. It took 2 full-speed collisions, activating the metal battering ram, and 3 consecutive gunshots to the head to finally bring it down for good. If it had been given a chance to counterattack, I'm afraid that battle would have been far more brutal. Just then, the refrigerated truck and the SUV caught up. Throughout the entire fight, Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan barely had a chance to lift a finger, watching the whole thing from a distance. Yet, what they saw was enough to leave both of them utterly shell-shocked. Even though they already knew I was strong and the transit vehicle was a beast, actually seeing me go head-to-head with and slaughter such a terrifying monster was a spectacle that completely shattered their imaginations. The refrigerated truck and the SUV pulled up right next to the dead python. Zhang Hai stared out the window, unable to keep himself from blurting out, "Compared to this python, my 200-pound frame is nothing but a bean sprout. It could swallow me whole in a single gulp." If this python had coiled around the refrigerated truck, it probably would have crushed both the vehicle and everyone inside into a heap of scrap metal in an instant. Sun Kuan swung his door open and hopped out, quickly picking off a few stray zombies before walking right up to the python. It looked hair-raising from a distance, but up close, its terrifying scale became even more overwhelming. Sun Kuan was a heavily built man, yet standing next to this python, its torso was still 2, even 3 times wider than him. Its scales were as large as open palms. Touching them felt ice cold, and when he gave them a light tap, they felt as hard as solid steel. The impact actually made his knuckles throb, exactly like rapping on a solid iron plate. Glancing over at the wound ripped open by the ram, the flesh was a mangled mess, and the scales had caved deep inward. The raw power of that metal ram was downright terrifying. Against mutant beasts with this kind of blinding speed, a battering ram was far more effective than an air cannon. The air cannon required charging time and a perfect firing angle, making a moving target incredibly difficult to hit. That's why I didn't use the air cannon this time. Corroborating that, those guys looked like military personnel, and I didn't want to expose that kind of weaponry to them. A mechanical ram was much easier to explain. "Old son, catch!" Zhang Hai shouted, hopping down with his rifle while tossing a military dagger to Sun Kuan. Sun Kuan caught it, gave it a few practice flips, and then stared blankly at the gargantuan snake before him. "How the hell do we even butcher this thing?" he muttered, a bit lost. A mutant beast this massive would quickly attract a horde of zombies once dead, so it had to be processed immediately. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan eagerly took on the task. Though they weren't powerhouse fighters, they had plenty of muscle. They had no intention of being dead weight to the team. The shockwaves from the intense battle had scattered the zombie horde, leaving only a few dozen stragglers, which the group of soldiers quickly eliminated. Even so, they didn't rush over right away. Only the captain, accompanied by one soldier, helped the old man down from the truck while the young girl supported his arm, leaving the vehicle to follow slowly behind. The lone soldier split off to scavenge the surroundings, while the captain and the elderly man's family walked toward us. As they approached the carcass, sheer dread was written all over the girl's face. Even though she knew the python was dead, the traumatic memory of it dragging away over a dozen of their men made her hesitant to even get close. The captain stared at the devastating wound left by the ram, his eyes twitching slightly. No matter how long his squad had fought, they couldn't even scratch those scales. Yet here, a single ram had delivered such a catastrophic injury. He was genuinely at a loss for words. "Friends," the captain called out, halting his steps. A look of deep gratitude softened his rugged, tanned face as he raised his hand in a formal military salute. "Professor Zhang and I came over to personally express our deepest gratitude. Thank you for saving our lives." Professor Zhang peered through the windshield toward me, waving his hand before bowing deeply to thank the entire team. Today, if it weren't for us, his own old life would have been forfeit, which mattered little to him. But his granddaughter would have absolutely met a grim end right here. Having just brushed past the jaws of death, anyone would feel incredibly blessed to be alive. Professor Zhang was no exception. Though he had fully steeled himself to face death earlier, now that he was truly saved, a lingering tremor of fear still shook his soul. The girl bowed alongside her grandfather, then turned to Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan, repeatedly thanking them in a clear, sweet voice. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan scratched their noses in mild embarrassment. This girl was remarkably well-mannered. Her aura clearly showed she didn't come from an ordinary background. Anyone heavily guarded by the military was bound to be someone of elite status. "Don't mention it," I replied from inside. Even though my primary goal wasn't a rescue mission, they understood the situation and were genuinely thankful. The captain suddenly offered Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan some advice on how to skin the carcass, telling them to flip it onto its back. "The underbelly is much softer. Slice it open from there, and it'll peel off easily." Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan immediately got to work. Without this tip, they probably would have struggled for a long time. The captain chuckled, mentioning that he had eaten wild snake before, but they were always small ones under a meter long. A monstrosity of this size was a first for him. Then, his gaze drifted to the ram on the transit vehicle, and he couldn't resist asking if we had modified it ourselves. I glanced at the three individuals standing before me, remaining seated inside the vehicle with my hand firmly gripping my rifle. I wasn't about to let my guard down. The captain clearly noticed my wariness but chose not to mention it, while the elderly man and his granddaughter posed zero threat anyway. From the way they approached, it was obvious they just wanted to show goodwill. In reality, the captain had initially opposed Professor Zhang and his granddaughter getting close, harboring his own suspicions about us. But Professor Zhang had been stubborn, pointing out that if I had malicious intent, would they even be able to put up a fight? It was better to show absolute sincerity from the get-go. With that in mind, I nodded. "Yeah, I modified this vehicle myself." The captain froze slightly in surprise. He had assumed that either Zhang Hai or Sun Kuan was the mechanic behind the build, while I was simply the squad leader and marksman. He never expected me to be the actual engineer. "That's incredible," he murmured, completely impressed, unable to offer any other words of praise. To pull off a modification like this, I must have a special ability related to mechanics, which perfectly aligned with the cover story I usually used. The young girl stared at me with glittering eyes. Earlier, when she saw me calmly shoot the python right in the eye twice in a row, she had already been in awe. Now, learning that this entire war machine was custom-built by my own hands, her admiration grew tenfold. Revering someone powerful, especially the one who just saved your life, was a completely natural human reaction. "I'm Shen Dao, from the Zhonghai Safe Zone." The captain introduced himself. "And this is Professor Zhang and his granddaughter, Zhang Jiaying." As Shen Dao introduced them, he unslung a small pouch from his back and tossed it toward Sun Kuan. Sun Kuan caught it, counterfeiting a chuckle at its noticeable weight. Opening it up, he found roughly 500 to 600 rounds of ammunition inside. Shen Dao explained that their ammo supplies were running low and asked us not to look down on the gesture, adding that if they found any functional firearms later, they would throw those in too. He called it a small amount, but ammunition was incredibly valuable in the apocalypse, let alone rounds for a Type 95 assault rifle. Just securing 2 or 3 working rifles would be a massive haul. Without me, they wouldn't have been able to keep any of these supplies anyway, so it was only fair that I accepted them. Shen Dao sending his men to salvage gear was his way of showing earnest gratitude. Professor Zhang had urged him to be sincere, and Shen Dao fully agreed. If I had any interest at all, it would be in their gear, so he decisively offered it up. Then, he went on to ask, by the way, would your team happen to be interested in the Zhonghai safe zone? Surely there wouldn't be any hostility here. Before the apocalypse hit, nations had received advanced warnings. While trying to stabilize the public, they had quietly prepared by constructing secure safe zones. The Zhonghai safe zone was one of those strongholds. Shen Dao knew well that a high-tier survivor squad like ours must have heard of it. Although the main military forces had pulled out of the city centers, they still maintained satellite-style bases in the outskirts. Given that our team possessed firearms and ammunition, it was impossible that we hadn't crossed paths with the military before. Sure enough, the moment Shen Dao mentioned the Zhonghai safe zone, a flash of irritation crossed the faces of both Zhang Hai and Sun Kun. As former ordinary civilians, hearing about the military establishing exclusive safe zones to protect the societal elite naturally triggered a bitter resentment inside them. While they rationally understood that it was impossible to save everyone in a global catastrophe, and that even those being heavily protected weren't guaranteed absolute safety, nobody wanted to be the disposable trash left behind to die. The people standing right before them, Shen Dao and his squad, were military executioners, while Professor Zhang and his granddaughter were the very elite being coddled. Without a single word being spoken, the atmosphere around Zhang Hai and Sun Kun noticeably froze over. I fell into silence for a moment, a name suddenly flashing through my mind. Li Yusin. It was thanks to her that I managed to modify the base vehicle in the first place. Moreover, during that critical moment, she was the one who called to warn me about an escape route. By now, Li Yusin should have reached the Zhonghai safe zone. I wonder how she's doing. Is she still alive, or has she already turned into a mutant? My reaction, along with my teammates, didn't escape Shen Dao's eyes. He instantly caught on to what we were thinking. Professor Zhang noticed the shift too. Only young Zhang Jiaying remained oblivious, unable to understand why the atmosphere had suddenly grown so tense. Shen Dao spoke up, his voice dropping an octave. He explained that they were just ordinary soldiers. When the apocalypse broke out, they received orders to hold a toll station to assist arriving survivors. They were told that absolutely anyone, including their own comrades or even themselves, could turn into monsters at any given moment. And if that happened, they had to open fire and eliminate them immediately. Back then, nobody believed it. But then, everyone suddenly blacked out. When he came to, the 2 officers right beside him had already turned into monsters. Out of the original 500 soldiers, only 72 survived in the end. They were terrified and frantic about their own families, yet they had to push forward with their mission, digging in at the toll station to guide survivors toward the regrouping points in the rear. That was until the zombie tide completely overwhelmed them, forcing a retreat. During that breakout, another 36 men sacrificed their lives. By the time they reached the safe zone, only 27 were left. Most had died simply because they couldn't adapt fast enough to the raw brutality of the apocalypse. Yet, among the survivors they protected, not a single soul was harmed. Hearing this, Zhang Jiaying seemed to realize something. As she listened to Shen Dao calmly recount those numbers, her nose twinged and her eyes welled up with tears. Nodding, she whispered that Captain Shen and his men were incredibly brave. Over a dozen men had heroically laid down their lives just to protect her and her grandfather. Professor Zhang fell silent for a long moment before murmuring that he was just an ordinary old man. He would gladly give everything if needed, but whatever contributions he could make could never weigh against a dozen human lives. Hearing this, Zhang Hai and Sun Kun's expressions turned complicated. They silently shook their heads and went back to butchering the mutant python without another word. I looked at them and asked Professor Zhang where he came from. He explained that he and Jiaying had been on the run ever since the outbreak started. They later managed to establish radio contact with the military, and Shun Dao guided them to the safe zone. Shun Dao chimed in, adding that Professor Zhang had initially been escorted to a secure location, but the defense squad met with disaster and was completely wiped out. Fortunately, the grandfather and granddaughter found a hidden spot to bunker down. I nodded, agreeing that it was indeed a stroke of luck. In the apocalypse, even the protected ones often only survived on pure chance. But Shun Dao let out a bitter laugh, remarking that their luck might have finally run out. With their remaining ammunition and manpower, making it back to the Zhonghai safe zone on their own was a suicide mission. That was why he had asked if I had any interest in going there. I caught his drift, and Shun Dao offered a faint smile without denying it. He wanted me to escort them. Right then, a wounded soldier stepped down from the truck. He looked barely 18 or 19, his face still holding a lingering boyishness, but his lips had already turned a bruised purple. Putrid black blood seeped from his arm. Zhang Jiaying called out to him as Brother Bill, clearly quite close to him. But Bill only gave a silly, reassuring smile, telling her not to get too close because he had a quick task to attend to. Clutching his bag, he gave Shun Dao a crisp salute, saying he just wanted to go for a brief walk. Shun Dao opened his mouth to say something, but ultimately chose silence, watching him walk toward a nearby storefront. Staring at his retreating back, Zhang Jiaying suddenly gasped, quickly clamping her hands over her mouth. I let out a heavy sigh, grabbed my rifle, and stepped out of the vehicle to follow Shun Dao. When we pushed open the shop door, Bill was already collapsed in a pool of blood, a triangular military dagger driven deep into his chest. His rifle lay beside him untouched. He hadn't used it because they were completely out of ammo. Shun Dao picked up Bill's bag. Inside, there was only an empty wallet and 2 photographs. One was a family photo, showing a middle-aged couple smiling warmly. The other was a picture of a plainly dressed girl with her hair tied in braided pigtails, looking sweet and modest. At that moment, a heavy weight sank into my chest. Everyone has a story of their own. In times of peace, when someone passes away, their family and friends carry on their legacy and keep their story alive. But in this chaotic world, when a person dies, their family is often already gone. Who will be left to remember them? The sun slowly dipped below the horizon, casting a blood-red twilight over the streets. I silently watched Shun Dao and the 3 remaining soldiers carry their comrade's body deeper into the shop, carefully placing the photographs beside him before barricading the entrance. Flames roared to life, engulfing the storefront in a sea of fire. The blaze cast a flickering glow over Shun Dao's rugged face, and the eyes of this otherwise iron-willed man were now glistening with tears. The soldiers removed Bill's military cap and placed it before the roaring flames. His military insignia gleamed, reflecting the intense light of the fire. Shun Dao pulled out a canteen, murmuring that he knew Bill loved a good drink, but in these harsh times, there wasn't a drop of liquor left. He'd have to make do with water to send him off. He poured the water onto the ground, where it mingled with the crimson blood. He muttered that they couldn't afford a proper burial. Let this insignia be your headstone, and let this battlefield be your grave. There's no strong liquor, only water to send you off. May you be a hero in life, and a commander of spirits in death. Beneath the fading twilight and before the blazing inferno, the 3 soldiers stood rigid, offering a final salute. I quietly took in the scene. A military insignia for a headstone, a battlefield for a grave. Perhaps this was the ultimate destiny for warriors in the apocalypse. Night began to fall as Zhang Hai and Sun Kun frantically worked to harvest the mutant python's meat, the heavy stench of blood blanketing the entire street. Brother Jiang, Zhang Hai suddenly shouted with absolute excitement, sprinting over to hand me a brilliant, translucent crystal. A level 2 mutant crystal. I couldn't conceal my own excitement either. Gripping the crystal tightly, I immediately felt a vibrant wave of warmth surging right into my palm. This crystal was nearly the size of a ping-pong ball. At first glance, it bore a deep, blood-red hue, but under the light, fine, capillary-like vein patterns emerged, radiating a faint crimson glow. One look was all it took to tell it was leagues apart from a level 1 crystal, both in size and coloration. I'll keep this crystal. As for the mutant meat, you guys take 100 pounds each, and leave the rest to Zhu Ying. This mutant python was truly colossal, Even after skinning and deboning it, there was still nearly a ton of meat left. This was by no means a small haul, especially since it was level 2 mutant meat, which was incomparably better than level 1. Even though the python was massive, it was still a reptile, so its overall yield couldn't compare to a mutant boar or other naturally bulky creatures. A mutant beast's danger level was never determined by its size alone. The meat yield wasn't astronomical, but the sheer difficulty of taking it down had been insanely high. This victory was largely thanks to Ying's superb driving skills and the flawless coordination between Zhu Ying and me. Lately, I felt like Zhu Ying had been getting the short end of the stick, so while I kept the most valuable mutant crystal, I left the lion's share of the meat to her. As for Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan, their combat power wasn't spectacular, but they worked incredibly hard and shouldered almost all the heavy lifting. Because of that, giving them a fair share of the spoils was only right. Hearing this distribution, both Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan felt a bit embarrassed but didn't refuse. If anything, it only made them work with even greater enthusiasm. The mutant python was simply too massive, its spilling blood dyeing the entire street crimson. If we didn't finish up quickly, not only zombies but other mutant beasts would soon be drawn here by the heavy scent of blood. Thank you, Brother Jiang. Zhu Ying beamed, a bright smile lighting up her face. To her, the split didn't matter at all. What was hers was mine, and as long as I had food to eat, she certainly wouldn't go hungry. I pocketed the level 2 mutant crystal, feeling exceptionally great, and began pondering how to put it to the best possible use. Just then, Shen Dao walked over. His eyes were still a bit bloodshot, but his expression had returned to normal. As a soldier, no matter how deeply he grieved, he had to keep his emotions in check. Your last name is Jiang, right? Mind if I call you Brother Jiang? Shen Dao greeted me, his eyes drifting to the crystal in my hand as he murmured, "So that's what a level 2 mutant crystal looks like." "Have you seen a level 2 mutant crystal before, Captain Shin?" I asked, a bit surprised. "I saw one once back at Zhonghai Sector 1, he replied. Shen Dao nodded. "But they are incredibly rare. If you ever want to sell it, you can bring it to Zhonghai Sector 1 and sell it to our military. The price definitely won't be low." As he spoke, a flash of envy crossed his eyes. Even as military personnel on external missions, they were allowed to keep a portion of their battlefield spoils, like mutant beasts or resources. Securing such a massive haul of level 2 mutant meat along with a level 2 crystal was truly a staggering fortune. Shen Dao himself was an awakened user, so he knew exactly how vital mutant meat was for evolution. "We'll see," I replied with a faint smile. While most survivors would eagerly sell a level 2 crystal for weapons and resources, I had absolutely no intention of doing so. Instead, I changed the subject. Wasn't it called the Zhonghai Safe Zone? How did it become Zhonghai Sector 1? The Zhonghai Safe Island has limited space, and many factions have already set up their bases there, Shen Dao explained. So, the military established an additional safe zone nearby, called Zhonghai Sector 1, to accommodate the overflow of survivors. Since many survival teams gather in Sector 1, the military also set up a procurement post there to facilitate trade. Noticing my knowing smirk as he finished, he looked a bit embarrassed. Limited space was just the official excuse. The reality was that all the premium spots on the island had long been snatched up by the powerful and the elite. "Brother Jiang, I'll be blunt with you," Shen Dao said, taking a deep breath. "We only have 3 men left now. That's not enough to guarantee the safety of Professor Zhang and his granddaughter on the trek back to the Zhonghai Safe Zone. I want to hire your team for an escort mission. The military will issue a substantial reward corresponding to the mission's difficulty. What do you say? Would you be willing to help us?" Even as the words left his mouth, he didn't sound entirely confident. Given the sheer power of my squad, the safety of a government zone might not hold any appeal at all. Plenty of powerful survivor groups had already established their own independent factions and felt absolutely no need to rely on a government sanctuary. That was exactly why Shen Dao deliberately emphasized the procurement post at Sector 1 and the potential rewards, hoping it would be enough to sway me. My mind drifted to the evolution crystals the military was rumored to be researching, and then to Li Yusin. If the opportunity arose, I would definitely make a trip out there eventually. But right now, I still had my own agenda to take care of. Still, The scene of young Bill taking his own life and his comrades sending him off had left a profound impression on me. What kind of reward are we talking about? I asked. I was already somewhat interested in checking out the safe zone, so if there was a solid reward on top of it, I had no reason to refuse. After all, this bounty would be coming from the military and the government, not out of Shun Dao's personal pocket. Military-grade supplies. Whether you need ammunition, firearms, or grenades, Shun Dao offered quickly. And rest assured, you won't need to lift a finger under normal circumstances. Our squad will handle the standard zombies. We'll only need your coordination if we run into a massive horde or a high-level mutant beast. Hearing this, I shook my head. I don't need any of that. I want mutant crystals. What I'm lacking most right now are crystals. A single level 1 and a single level 2 crystal were nowhere near enough for my needs. Shun Dao looked slightly taken aback by my demand, but he was smart enough not to pry. After pondering for a brief moment, he spoke up. The military doesn't officially trade mutant crystals since we're hoarding them too. But how about 3? 3 level 1 mutant crystals. 3 crystals. Before this, I had to completely clean out a black market just to get my hands on 4. 3 crystals was a substantial offer just for an escort mission. Besides, taking the job meant I could conveniently drop Ren Shiyu off at the Zhonghai safe zone while getting a first-hand look at the current state of affairs and the military's research progress. I nodded. Deal. But I need to take a detour first. A detour. Shun Dao agreed without a moment's hesitation. No problem. You call the shots. Where are we heading? Jinling Port, I replied. Shun Dao looked slightly bewildered, clearly unable to fathom why I'd want to go there. Get your men sorted out. We're about to move, I added, turning on my heel to walk back to the transit vehicle. Shun Dao stood frozen for a second, scratching his head in confusion. Are they scavenging for supplies over there? Whatever the case, my agreement allowed him to breathe a massive sigh of relief. This survival squad was far more potent than his own unit even at full strength. Traveling with us meant making it to the Zhonghai safe zone alive was a near certainty. Once the python carcass was stripped clean of its meat, the convoy quickly relocated to an open clearing to camp for the night. A heavy silence soon enveloped the clearing, punctuated only by the whistling wind and the lingering, faint scent of blood. A short while later, Shun Dao personally walked over, carrying 3 Type 95 assault rifles. These were weapons recovered from their fallen comrades. He had carefully wiped the blood clean before handing them over to me, explaining that his remaining men already had their own firearms. Keeping these would be redundant, so he insisted I take them. In his mind, though my team was exceptionally powerful, our resource consumption must be astronomical. With 4 awakened users on board, especially Zhu Ying and me, superior power meant needing massive amounts of mutant meat to sustain ourselves. He figured we wouldn't want to waste precious resources trading for guns and ammo. Since I hadn't requested weapons as part of our contract, he saw these 3 rifles as a token of compensation. Seeing how insistent Shun Dao was, it would have been rude to decline. Ying, take these and store them away, I called out. Ying gave a brief nod and pulled out a completely ordinary, heavy-duty canvas sack. I used to keep quite a few supplies strapped to the vehicle's roof before moving them into the storage dimension, but I had kept this specific sack handy. Shun Dao had expected us to produce some tactical cases or proper weapon crates to store the 3 rifles. He had even felt a trace of admiration, knowing that to most survival teams, firearms were priceless assets always handled with absolute care. But the moment Ying unzipped the bag, the smile on Shun Dao's face instantly froze, and his eyes twitched uncontrollably. Inside that heavy-duty canvas bag was a crammed, tangled mess of assorted firearms. I had previously scavenged a massive haul of weapons from the black market and simply shoved them all in here for convenience. I didn't mind letting them see it. While this stockpile would make other survivors go green with envy, it wasn't a concern with a disciplined soldier like Shun Dao. However, I didn't expect that even without a greedy bone in his body, Shun Dao would still be completely stupefied by such a staggering quantity. So that ordinary canvas sack is actually used to store guns. Has our squad really become this incredibly wealthy? He wondered in disbelief. No wonder I hadn't given a damn about his spare rifles. With this much firepower, we could easily double our squad's equipment and still have plenty to spare. Why would we need more? There were even grenades, crates of ammunition, and light machine guns stuffed inside. An absolute fortune, carelessly thrown into a basic canvas sack like trash. Thinking back to his proud assumptions from just moments ago, Xin Dao couldn't help but feel a wave of sheer embarrassment. Only after he dropped the 3 rifles inside and zipped it back up did Xin Dao reluctantly tear his gaze away from the bag. Brother Jiang, you mentioned you're heading toward Jinling Port, right? I can actually guide you for part of the way, he offered, revealing his true intention. He spoke smoothly, laying his cards on the table. Isn't our current route heading straight for Jinling Port anyway? I asked. This particular path had been thoroughly mapped out by Sun Quan. That's true, and it's short and easy to navigate. But when my squad advanced through here earlier, we specifically cleared out an alternative route. Taking that path will be much safer. There are no major blockades or abandoned vehicles jamming the lanes, Xin Dao explained. Their military trucks were even bulkier than my transit vehicle, so if they could pass through smoothly, my ride would have no trouble at all. More importantly, it allowed us to completely bypass a heavily populated urban sector. That sounds ideal. Sorry for the trouble then, I said, nodding in agreement. Haha, it's a small matter, don't mention it. I'll head back first then. They had brought their own meat supply and were getting ready for dinner when I suddenly heard a woman's voice calling out. Dinner's ready. The vehicle door slid open, and a beautiful young woman stood there, holding a plate of steaming, incredibly fragrant mutant meat. Xin Dao had previously only caught glimpses of the driver's cabin and never expected this vehicle to be a fully equipped motorhome. A modified minibus with blistering speed, a roaring powerhouse engine, and a lethal front ram was already incredibly badass. But it was actually a luxury RV capable of hot cooking. What's more, the girl carrying the food was strikingly gorgeous, her unique gray eyes exuding a rare, captivating charm. Xin Dao had spotted 3 girls inside my vehicle, each one an absolute beauty. He knew one was my sister, but as for the other 2, this left him utterly marveling. Overwhelming power, a mobile armored fortress, and stunning women by his side, my lifestyle in the apocalypse looked like a luxurious, unchained joyride. Enough to make absolutely anyone green with envy. Oh, by the way, I'm not sure if I should ask this, Xin Dao muttered, pausing just as he was about to leave. You're gathering mutant crystals. Is it because you know that the Research Institute at the Zhonghai Safe Island is studying them? I gave him a brief glance and nodded. That's right. There was no point hiding it. Then it all makes sense, Xin Dao muttered, nodding to himself before turning around to call out. Professor Zhang. Professor Zhang and his granddaughter, Zhang Jiaying, quickly walked over. Jiaying had been dying of curiosity but was too shy earlier. Now that she was here, she widened her inquisitive eyes, darting her gaze between me and the massive bus. Catching sight of the fully furnished living space inside, she couldn't suppress a small gasp of awe. Having been raised under strict discipline and spared from brutal hardships since the outbreak, Jiaying's mind was still quite innocent, her every emotion vividly painted across her face. Professor Zhang, on the other hand, carried the steady, composed aura of an elderly academic. He offered a gentle smile and nodded to greet me. Professor Zhang is a top expert we were explicitly ordered to rescue to lead the research on mutant crystals, Xin Dao introduced. I paused slightly, shifting my gaze toward the old man. I realized the Zhonghai Safe Island must have spent immense resources and risked countless lives to extract this professor, because they desperately needed his mind. The apocalypse had arrived, but that didn't mean humanity would remain buried in darkness forever. To conquer the zombies, reverse the virus, and eventually rebuild civilization, relying solely on military brute force and awakened individuals was nowhere near enough. They needed minds like Professor Zhang's. Professor Zhang was formerly an academician at the Institute of Microbiology under the Chinese Academy of Sciences, a towering authority in the field of virology, Xin Dao added. You praise me too much, Professor Zhang said, dismissively waving his hand. I've already consulted with several colleagues over at the Safe Island via radio. If I explain it with complex terminology, you wouldn't find it engaging, so I'll put it in layman's terms. Awakened individuals require an immense influx of energy to evolve. Mutant crystals house the absolute concentrated energy essence of mutant beasts. The combined nutritional value of an entire beast's meat cannot match a single crystal. Furthermore, crystals contain a specific catalyst absent in the meat, offering far more volatile and potent energy. However, these crystals cannot be consumed raw or digested normally. The essence inside must be meticulously extracted before an awakened can safely absorb it, which exponentially accelerates the rate of evolution. His breakdown was crystal clear, making perfect sense even to Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan standing nearby. I nodded, my conviction solidifying that mutant crystals would only become astronomically more expensive as time went on. I quietly calculated my next steps. Once we reached Zhonghai Sector 1, I would liquidate a large portion of this weapon stockpile to trade for crystals. Otherwise, if I waited until the market value skyrocketed, they might become impossible to acquire even with unlimited wealth. The thought gave me a bit of a headache, considering I was the one who needed crystals the most. After conversing for a while longer, everyone wrapped up and retreated to their respective areas to rest. Sitting back in the driver's cabin, I pulled out the Level 2 mutant crystal. In this apocalyptic wasteland, deadly threats could strike at any moment. Since I had the golden opportunity to boost my strength, hesitation was out of the question. I had already mapped out the optimal way to use this crystal. Within the system, there were plenty of game-changing upgrades that could be unlocked with a Level 2 crystal. If I unlocked the Energy Crystal Extraction Laboratory, I could directly synthesize energy crystals with a purity that completely blew the military's current research out of the water. On top of that, it wouldn't be restricted to just my own personal use. To say I wasn't tempted by the extraction lab would be a blatant lie. I desperately wanted to activate it. Furthermore, the elemental manipulation ability, which would grant me absolute control over forces like wind, fire, and lightning, was incredibly alluring. However, I had only recently undergone a cerebral evolution. While my reaction speed and agility had tripled, I hadn't fully acclimated to these massive physical shifts yet, nor had I trained them to the point of pure muscle memory. Biting off more than I could chew would only backfire. So, despite the burning desire, I firmly suppressed those urges for now. What I needed above all else at this exact moment was a massive upgrade to my base physical constitution. Tripling my agility allowed my body's physical reactions to keep pace with my newly evolved brain. However, if my overall constitution wasn't raised to match, I wouldn't be able to sustain this heightened state for long. It was like an ultra-high-speed machine built from fragile materials. Pushing it to its limits would only accelerate its mechanical failure. More importantly, a stronger physique directly translated to a much higher capacity for self-defense. At the very least, if the base vehicle ever malfunctioned, or if I was forced to step outside, I wouldn't feel as exposed and insecure as before. There were two paths to upgrading my physical constitution: boosting my base physical attributes, or awakening a bloodline. I wanted both. But compared to a simple attribute boost, awakening a bloodline yielded the greatest overall returns. Interfacing with the system, I pulled up the Bloodline Awakening menu, skimming through the options until my eyes locked onto the Blood Evolution lineage. This lineage bore a slight resemblance to Porphyria, but only superficially. Before the apocalypse, I had heard a radical theory suggesting that conditions like porphyria, or even cancer, were actually flawed, destructive precursors to human evolution and mutation. In its current stage, that evolution was chaotic and deadly. Cancer cells possessed the terrifying ability to replicate almost infinitely, invading and destroying normal tissue, yet the exceptionally resilient heart muscle remained virtually immune to it. This underscored the mind-blowing potential of a blood-based mutation. If every muscle fiber in the human body shared the impervious characteristics of cardiac muscle, even cancer wouldn't stand a chance. In fact, many scientists had long viewed cancer cells as the true key to biological immortality. They studied how it bypassed telomere degradation to achieve infinite division, hoping to unlock eternal youth. The blood evolution lineage represented the perfected, flawless evolution of the circulatory system. Devoid of any destructive side effects, it would fundamentally fortify my entire body. This was true human evolution, granting unparalleled strength, speed, stamina, and above all, a terrifyingly potent healing factor. It was this exact regeneration capability that solidified my decision. In an apocalyptic wasteland where medical supplies were scarce and environments were brutal, even a non-fatal stab wound could easily trigger a lethal infection. Even if it didn't kill you outright, any injury that compromised your mobility could trap you in a prolonged, deadly predicament. A normal human's physical defense was already pitifully weak. Add an open injury to the mix, and you'd have absolutely no leverage left against zombies and mutant beasts. Thus, the sheer value of rapid regeneration was completely indisputable. I weighed the options carefully. Sitting firmly in the driver's seat, my resolve hardened. I was going to awaken the blood evolution lineage. With a distinct click, the system slot slid open. The level 2 mutant crystal I had just acquired, barely even warm in my hand, was promptly dropped into the receptacle. The slot snapped shut, and the system's voice chimed instantly. Level 2 mutant crystal detected. Unlocking compatible upgrade pathways. As the comprehensive list materialized before me, I maintained my composure and issued a silent command. Activate the blood evolution lineage. Scanning host's physical condition. Scan complete. A full-body wireframe projection of my anatomy appeared on the console, accompanied by a cascading stream of vital data, heart rate, blood pressure, and various metabolic indices. Selection confirmed. Synthesizing gene evolution serum. I had initially assumed this process would take hours, but to my surprise, the system chimed with a completion notice just 15 minutes later. A vial of pale pink, nearly translucent fluid materialized in my hand. I gave it a brief glance before draining it completely, without a shred of hesitation. A few seconds later, a bizarre sensation spread rapidly through my body. Thump thump, thump thump. The ambient sounds of the world seemed to recede into the distance, leaving only the thunderous, rhythmic pounding of my own heart echoing like a war drum in my ears. My limbs suddenly lost all power, paralyzing me instantly. A wave of intense heat surged outward from my core, radiating right down to my palms and the soles of my feet. The veins beneath my skin bulged prominently, to the point where I could almost visually trace the roaring torrent of blood rushing through them. My entire circulatory system was accelerating into overdrive. The blood oxygen saturation levels spiked dramatically, triggering a comprehensive overhaul of my physical stats. It reminded me of elite athletes who train at high, low oxygen altitudes specifically to boost their body's oxygen-carrying capacity. Some even went as far as blood doping before competitions to maximize their endurance. All of those complex methods, at their core, were engineered simply to elevate blood oxygen levels. The transformation raged on for over half an hour. When I abruptly sat up from the driver's seat, the blood evolution lineage had been fully awakened. I clenched both fists, taking a deep breath before releasing a long, controlled exhale. 2 streams of pale white vapor shot out from my nostrils like twin air arrows, piercing forward for over a meter before dissipating. Even I was momentarily stunned by the sight. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly, thinking, if every breath looks like this from now on, won't I basically turn into a base vehicle myself? I'm literally venting exhaust fumes here. However, the surprise was fleeting. I quickly realized it was merely the byproduct of venting a massive accumulation of waste air. As my respiration normalized, my breaths simply felt noticeably deeper, and those dramatic vapor trails stopped appearing. Taking another deep breath, I held it in, wanting to test exactly how long I could last now. Back when I used to swim pre-apocalypse, I could only hold my breath for a little over a minute, a perfectly average baseline. The seconds ticked away, effortlessly blowing past my old limit, yet I didn't feel even a hint of chest tightness or discomfort. 5 full minutes passed before I slowly began to exhale the depleted air. Ordinarily, once a human completely empties their lungs after holding their breath, dizziness and a pounding oxygen deprivation headache would set in instantly. In reality, some oxygen still remains in the bloodstream at this point. The body automatically enters survival mode, constricting blood vessels in non-essential areas like the skin to prioritize blood and oxygen flow to the brain. However, brain cells are profoundly sensitive to any drop in oxygen, triggering intense panic and discomfort. If pushed for another 5 minutes, irreversible brain damage would occur. Yet, as I emptied my lungs, there wasn't a single symptom of anemia or hypoxia. I blinked, almost amused by my own absurd transformation. The oxygen saturation in my blood was simply too immense, effortlessly sustaining my entire anatomy and brain. The second hand on the clock kept spinning. 7 minutes, 10 minutes, and then 20 minutes flew by. Before the apocalypse, the official world record for holding one's breath was 15 minutes and 2 seconds, set by a German. Yet I had shattered it with absolute ease. 20 minutes. Only at that milestone did a faint, minor hint of lightheadedness finally creep in. Holding one's breath for 20 minutes was completely unthinkable in the old world. But now, with the blood evolution lineage unlocked via the system, I had achieved it effortlessly. I knew I could push it even further, but this was more than enough. I had my answer. This outcome left me profoundly satisfied. The cellular evolution and optimization of my blood would spark a comprehensive upgrade across my entire physical anatomy. While this kind of evolution wasn't as overtly flashy or visually dramatic as a werewolf or werbear bloodline, its underlying foundation and potential were exponentially more powerful. Next, I activated my cerebral acceleration. Previously, whenever I overused my brain enhancement, dizziness would inevitably set in because my blood flow couldn't keep pace with the hyperactive metabolic demands of my brain cells. But now, with my circulatory system evolved, I could not only sustain the state significantly longer, but I could also feel my cognitive processing power actively strengthening. It wasn't that the world's slow-motion effect had altered. Rather, my eyes were capturing far more intricate details from my surroundings, and my brain was processing the incoming sensory data at a vastly superior rate. This meant I could spot every microvariable during combat, massively amplifying my analytical speed and physical reaction times. This blood evolution lineage was an absolute masterpiece. I was exceptionally thrilled. I had never cared much for transforming into a beastly hybrid anyway. True evolution lay in perfecting the core human blueprint itself, mirroring my cerebral upgrades. But right on the heels of that profound realization, a ravenous, gut-wrenching hunger suddenly hit me like a truck. Ing, is there any leftover barbecue from last night? I can't wait. I need to replenish my energy immediately. At first, Ing just reheated the meat and handed it to me before turning back to watch her anime. But as I kept eating without showing any signs of stopping, she had to constantly reheat plates and even cook a few more fresh batches. Eventually, she abandoned her anime altogether and just sat there, silently staring at me eat. Even Ren Shiyu looked up from her e-reader. Initially, she just cast a casual glance over, but gradually, her expression shifted from mild surprise to utter amazement. The only one who didn't react much was Ing, because she already knew I had just activated the blood evolution lineage. One by one, plates of the level 2 mutant beast meat we had harvested today completely vanished into my stomach. Level 2 mutant meat contained vastly more energy than level 1. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan could only manage about 4 pounds each before feeling completely stuffed, whereas I easily polished off a whopping 15 pounds. My accelerated blood circulation triggered a massive spike in metabolism and digestive efficiency. The more mutant meat I consumed, the more energy I absorbed, which in turn exponentially accelerated the upgrade rate of my physical stats and latent abilities. Not only Ing, but even Ren Shiyu noticed this profound shift. Watching me single-handedly devour that mountain of level 2 mutant meat, her eyes were filled with absolute disbelief. "Brother, how has your appetite grown so much lately?" Ing asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "My mechanical modification ability has made some progress, so my metabolism and stomach have gotten a bit stronger too," I replied smoothly. "Progress, huh?" Ing didn't fully comprehend the technical details, but seeing my food intake spike like this was enough to know it was highly impressive. Ren Shiyu remained silent, but a stormy wave of shock surged in her heart. Just a bit of progress? The more contact she had with me, the more clearly she realized that I was growing stronger at a terrifying speed that completely defied common sense. "All right, time for bed," I said. Before Ren Shiyu could even react, Ing had already claimed her spot and lain down on the sofa. She had an exquisite figure, and even lying on her side, the sofa wasn't quite long enough for her long legs, forcing her to curl up slightly. This posture meant she was almost facing me directly as she slept. Rin Xiu stared wide-eyed at the scene, her face flushing crimson. The atmosphere inside the vehicle suddenly grew a bit peculiar. Besides, why was it always her? Did this mean that for the rest of the journey, she would have to sleep on the floor with me? Thinking of that scenario, Rin Xiu gently clutched the hem of her shirt and lowered her head in silence. Early the next morning, my convoy set off, with the military truck trailing closely behind as we headed straight for Jinling Port. Sure enough, the route cleared by Shun Dao and his men was exceptionally smooth. Along the way, they were once again completely awestruck by my minibus. Whenever we encountered a pack of zombies, the vehicle didn't slow down in the slightest, plowing straight through. As long as we didn't run into a massive zombie horde or a high-level mutant beast, this minibus faced virtually zero pressure against the undead. Initially, Shun Dao and his men kept their weapons drawn and ready, their nerves so tightly strung that the slightest movement would have triggered a burst of gunfire. But gradually, they realized that as long as they stayed behind my vehicle, they barely had to lift a finger. At first, they weren't used to it, their minds still tense like a coiled spring. But eventually, Shun Dao had to accept the simple truth. They genuinely had absolutely nothing to do. After days of continuous life-or-death combat under constant threat, suddenly becoming this leisurely felt unnatural not just to seasoned soldiers like Shun Dao, but even to Zhang Jiaying, the heavily protected young girl. Even though she wasn't fighting directly, every time she had watched Shun Dao and the others deal with zombies, she had been paralyzed with tension and fear. The relentless onslaught of zombies always made her feel like they would breach the vehicle at any second. But following my convoy, everything was entirely different. The zombies were simply sent flying by the impacts, while they just trailed along from behind, watching the pulverized remains scattered across the asphalt. By noon, the convoy successfully rolled into Jinling Port. This was the largest inland port in the nation. Countless cargo ships used to dock here daily, handling an astronomical volume of freight. Looking from afar, rows upon rows of shipping containers were stacked high, and the expansive river was choked with stationary cargo ships. The towering port cranes had long since ground to a halt, plunging the entire area into an eerie, chilling silence. It was this precise, dead tranquility that gave everyone goosebumps. "Do you know the exact location of that ship?" I asked. "Yes, I know," Rin Xiu nodded. A crawler-mounted drilling rig was no small piece of cargo. Furthermore, as the successor to the Rin Science and Technology Group, she couldn't afford to be careless. In fact, she had personally overseen this specific trade deal. Even if she didn't manage it on the ground, she remembered every single detail vividly from the reports. Jinling Port had a total of 8 distinct terminal sectors, with cargo sorted and unloaded accordingly. According to the reports, this specific cargo vessel had docked at the Longwan terminal, one of the 2 sectors specializing in container handling. I nodded. Following the road signs, we quickly located the Longwan terminal area. The number of zombies here wasn't exceptionally high, but several floating containers and numerous corpses drifted along the river's surface. Those bloated, waterlogged bodies sent shivers down the spine, especially since none of them were intact, leaving only severed limbs drifting about. The convoy continued to push deeper into the terminal docks. Rin Xiu stared out the window, suddenly pointing ahead with a hint of urgency in her voice. "That's it. It's massive," and couldn't help but blurt out. Even I was slightly caught off guard. I had seen plenty of cargo ships along the Jiangbei region, but none could match the sheer scale of this vessel. It stood like a colossal skyscraper, silently looming over the vast river. This was a dedicated car carrier, roughly 130 meters long and as tall as a 9-story building. It featured 9 decks, with a total deck space spanning more than 4 standard football fields, capable of holding up to 4,000 vehicles. "The mining truck you need is right on board," Rin Xiu explained. In truth, she had been constantly worried that the ship might have already departed. After spending time with me, she realized that although I appeared cold and detached, I was actually quite reasonable to live with. Even if the ship had been gone, I probably wouldn't have taken my anger out on her. But precisely because I had rescued her, provided her with food, clothing, and even hot showers, she genuinely hoped everything would go smoothly so I could secure the truck I wanted. Still, she couldn't help but wonder how such a massive, heavy mining truck could even drive on the roads when most bridges wouldn't be able to support its sheer weight. Naturally, that was just a passing thought she kept to herself. Since I wanted this vehicle, I was bound to have my own reasons. After clearing out a few trailing zombies, the minibus came to a halt not far from the massive cargo ship. The military truck immediately pulled up alongside us, and Xin Dao jumped down, walking over to inquire, "Brother Jiang, what's the plan?" "I'm going onto that ship," I replied. Xin Dao looked up, taking in the gargantuan vessel looming before them. Standing beneath the hull, even a tall guy like him felt as small as an ant. He didn't know what I was looking for on the ship, but seeing that I wasn't going to volunteer the information, he didn't ask. "This ship is massive, and we don't know what's up there. It could be pretty dangerous. If you don't mind, I'll go with you. The other two can stay behind to guard the vehicles and protect Professor Zhang and the rest." Xin Dao offered. Having him tag along today had made things so much easier. Those 3 level 1 mutant crystal cores were definitely well spent. Even though my objective had nothing to do with him, Xin Dao still took the initiative to help. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Although my blood evolution had been activated, I hadn't had a chance to test it in actual combat yet. It was better to be safe. Xin Dao was a soldier, highly skilled in reconnaissance and scouting terrain, perfect for an unfamiliar, complex environment like this. Ying, Zhu Ying, Zhang Hai, and Sun Kuan stepped out of the vehicles one after another. Zhu Ying brought her long blade along. The weapon immediately caught Xin Dao's eye. It was a custom military-grade weapon, made from a special alloy exclusive to the army. He marveled once again at how ridiculously wealthy my survival squad was. If we weren't using firearms, we were using custom weapons that were far more expensive. "Zhang Hai, you stay here," I instructed. "Even though there aren't many zombies around, we still need to be ready for anything." Zhang Hai acknowledged and walked toward the military truck with his gun. The minibus had incredibly high defense. As long as the doors were sealed tight, unless they ran into mutant beasts or a massive zombie horde, they'd be fine. After everyone got off and closed the minibus doors, Rin Xiyu stayed inside. She was a mental ability user, but her physique was just that of an ordinary person. Following us would be too dangerous. "Let's board," I said. Right in front of us was a massive iron door resting against the shore, separating the cargo ship from the mainland. When the iron door was pulled open, Sun Kuan couldn't help but shiver. A cold chill ran down his spine. This was the first time this door had been opened since the apocalypse began. This car carrier was actually a new type of vessel. Its shape somewhat resembled an aircraft carrier. Vehicles could drive inside through watertight doors at the stern or starboard side. We chose one of those watertight doors to enter. This door was much larger than a standard ship door, and opening it revealed a completely empty ramp. Standing before that door, we looked pitifully small. As we stepped inside, I heard Xin Dao take a sharp breath. It felt like we were walking straight into the maw of a pitch-black monster. The inside of the ship was eerily quiet. Every footstep echoed against the cold steel deck. The space was incredibly vast and dark, with vehicles parked tightly together. Aside from the drilling rig and the Renki Group's mining truck, this place held a massive number of cars. "Good lord, nothing but luxury rides," Sun Kuan muttered. Just a quick glance revealed a sea of logos that once symbolized wealth before the apocalypse. Each of these cars used to be worth millions, but now they were nothing more than scrap metal. Compared to them, our modified refrigerated truck had far more practical value. "Careful," Xin Dao warned in a low voice as we ventured deeper inside. I scanned our surroundings. The mining truck was huge and should have been easy to spot, but this ship had 9 parking decks, and I had no idea which one it was on. The cars were packed tightly, the lighting was dim, and we had to stay on guard for zombies lunging out of nowhere. After walking a bit further, Zhu Ying whispered, "It seems like there are no zombies here." She wasn't the only one. We had all noticed it. Normally, just the sound of footsteps would be enough to draw out a swarm of zombies. Yet, we hadn't seen a single one so far. "There's a body over there." Xin Dao's sharp eyes caught a sleeve sticking out from under a car. He approached with his gun raised to inspect it. A moment later, he looked up, frowning. "It's a zombie, torn to pieces. But the important thing is this. Little brother Jiang, come take a look." I had already walked over before he even finished speaking. In front of us was a luxury car, half of its body completely crushed flat. No matter how strong a zombie was, it couldn't do something like this. Everyone, stay alert. I couldn't find any specific clues, but my sense of unease was growing stronger. It was possible that while the ship was sealed, the zombies had slaughtered each other. That wasn't uncommon. But when we reached the second deck, I knew things weren't that simple. There were more and more bodies, most of them reduced to bare white bones. Some areas even bore the marks of terrifying impacts. Steel beams as thick as an arm were bent out of shape. And yet, still no zombies. Could they have all killed each other? Sun Kuan asked, though even he didn't believe it. The lack of any attacks only made us feel more on edge. We need to find that truck, fast, I said grimly. After walking a bit further, I finally spotted the colossal mining truck. Found it. But right at that moment, I noticed Shen Dao freeze in his tracks. What's wrong? I asked. He reached up and touched his forehead. His fingers came away with a pale yellow liquid. Slimy and foul-smelling. It wasn't water. Shen Dao immediately looked up and raised his gun, his scalp tingling. Up on the ceiling, a gigantic snake was slithering past. Bang! 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 Shen Dao pulled the trigger on instinct. At such close range, every single bullet hit its mark. The snake, which had been moving sluggishly, instantly went berserk. Its speed skyrocketed. Zhu Ying lunged forward, swinging her chain and throwing her long blade. Blue-white electricity flared, slashing fiercely into its body. Shocked by the current, the snake convulsed and vanished into the darkness in the blink of an eye. But in the split second the lightning flashed, I got a clear look at its shape. It wasn't a python. I caught a glimpse of a massive maw, packed with tiny teeth and pink flesh. It was both disgusting and terrifying. It's wounded, Shen Dao said. Shot at close range and took a direct hit from that lightning. It definitely took some heavy damage. Right after that, he let out a low groan. Zhu Ying turned pale, while Sun Kuan clutched his chest, feeling nauseous and dizzy. Even with my drastically enhanced physique, I still felt my blood churning. Why? Why do I suddenly feel so sick? Sun Kuan asked. I looked down and saw the steel deck vibrating slightly. Not just the floor, but the pipes and support pillars were shaking too. A ship over 100 meters long shouldn't be vibrating like this. Just then, a colossal shadow swept past in the distance, moving unbelievably fast. Don't shoot. It's not a snake. I yelled, stopping Shen Dao. When I saw that mouth earlier, I had my suspicions, but now I was certain. The vibration of the ship, the chaotic churning of our blood. This was a true behemoth. I immediately thought of infrasound. High-tech weapons mentioned before the apocalypse emitted waves below 20 Hz, resonating with the human body, causing organ disruption and even death. Human ears couldn't hear it, but the body could feel it. Internal organs vibrating at low frequencies easily fall into resonance. If a steel bridge could collapse from resonance, how could a human body withstand it? Certain animals like crocodiles, elephants, and tigers can also emit infrasound. A tiger's roar at around 18 Hz is enough to paralyze a person. This monster, it could attack using infrasonic waves. The zombies on this ship must have become its food. We had just walked right into its lair. Now, terrifying sounds of metal groaning and grinding echoed throughout the ship. It was hard to even imagine its true size. You guys fall back first. I'll be right behind you, I said quickly. Before Shen Dao could react, Ying and I dashed toward the mining truck. Little brother Jiang. Shen Dao's head was ringing, and he felt violently nauseous. Even with his physique, he couldn't handle it, yet I was telling them to run first. But when he saw how fast Ying and I were moving, he was completely stunned. I had left him over 10 meters behind in the blink of an eye. Too fast. That speed was almost on par with his all-out sprint. Zhu Ying and Sun Kuan were also dumbfounded. Zhu Ying's eyes went wide. How did her brother suddenly turn into an Olympic sprinter? Fall back. I'm going to get my brother, Zhu Ying shouted, darting after us before Shen Dao could even try to stop her. A bolt of lightning tore through the space. Zhu Ying hurled her long blade, and a lightning strike dozens of meters long slammed directly into the massive shadow sweeping through the darkness. So powerful. This was the second time Shen Dao had seen Zhu Ying go all out. But this time, in the dark confines of the ship's hold, the shockwave from the electrical current was far more intense. Electricity exploded violently around Zhu Ying. Her long hair was whipped up by the current. Standing amidst the flashing light, she looked like a goddess descending in a storm. Attacking from over 10 meters away with a wide area of effect, Zhu Ying's cover fire was incredibly effective. "Fall back a bit," Shen Dao said through gritted teeth. Before this, he had always thought his physical strength was an advantage, constantly worrying about the others. But now he realized that the one who needed worrying about the most was himself. He was the one becoming a burden. He and Sun Kuan quickly retreated outside, while Ing and I closed in on the mining truck. Ing already had excellent physical stats. I had directly configured that from the start. But what amazed me as I ran was that, when going all out, my speed wasn't inferior to hers at all. You have to understand, before this, my physique was just that of an ordinary person. My running speed was only on par with a healthy young man, nothing special. Yet after activating the blood evolution, I could reach this level. How could I not be thrilled? Right now, the oxygen levels in my blood were so high it was more potent than steroids. My enhanced circulatory system was constantly reinforcing my body. And with my muscles as strong as my heart muscle, the feeling of fatigue was practically non-existent. Hurry, hurry. I could clearly sense that the monster had gone completely berserk. The flashing lightning behind us was proof of that. Time was down to the second. I had to finish scanning this mining truck and get out immediately. Starseed, I roared in my mind. The level 1 mutant crystal core had already been placed in the base vehicle's slot beforehand. And the Starseed always existed within my consciousness. Even if the base vehicle wasn't here, I could connect to it at any time. Level 1 mutant crystal core detected. The following options can be activated. Activate secondary scan. Scan this mining truck. I roared internally. The scanning of this vehicle was handled directly by the Starseed. The base vehicle didn't need to be present. Secondary scan activated. Target detected. Vehicle type meets requirements. Scanning process initiated. I glued my eyes to the progress bar on the control panel. I had never seen those numbers crawl so slowly. Hurry up. Screech. Boom. I glanced to the side. A section of the ship's bulkhead right next to us suddenly caved in. This was the hull of a massive cargo ship, yet it deformed so easily. Scan progress 90%. Scan complete. Base vehicle has acquired its second form. This form is a mining truck. I didn't have time to listen to the introduction. The moment the scan finished, the colossal mining truck vanished from its spot. If Shun Dao or the others had seen this, their eyes would have popped out of their heads. But the situation was too urgent. Even Zhu Ying didn't have time to notice. Seeing Ing and me turning back, Zhu Ying let out a fierce shout, unleashing a full-power electrical strike. In an instant, a radius of over 10 meters around her was engulfed by countless writhing arcs of lightning. She stood amidst the current, gripping her long blade tightly, her long hair whipping wildly as she suppressed the monster. The steel deck was an excellent conductor, allowing her ability to reach its maximum potential. After discharging the electricity, Zhu Ying spun around to run. She knew she wasn't as fast as Ing and me, so she had to run first to avoid slowing us down. But right at that moment, I suddenly accelerated, lunging forward to scoop her up in my arms and carrying her as I ran. With my enhanced physique, my strength had also increased significantly. Carrying Zhu Ying didn't slow me down at all. Run, Ing and I sprinted like the wind. In the blink of an eye, we overtook Shun Dao and Sun Kuan, who had retreated first. Shen Dao was holding up okay. He was mainly waiting for Sun Kuan. But when he saw me blow past him, he could only stare in shock. What the hell was going on? Looking closer, he realized I was even carrying Zhu Ying. For a moment, his brain short-circuited. The whole group ran for our lives back the way we came. As we burst outside, I saw that Zhang Hai and the others who stayed behind were pale with fear. Zhang Hai was standing by the refrigerated truck, his eyes glued to the watertight door, waiting for us to appear. As everyone turned to look back, a chill ran down their spines. Massive, snake-like appendages hung down over the hull of the cargo ship, looking like the giant tentacles of an octopus, wrapping tightly around the entire vessel. The end of each snake was a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. This was clearly a colossal aquatic monster. The apocalypse had arrived, and even aquatic creatures had mutated, spawning terrifying monstrosities like this. It had devoured all the zombies on the ship, and probably other aquatic life too. evolving to a horrifying degree in such a short time. I screamed. The monster hadn't attacked the vehicles on the shore yet because it had been shot by Shun Dao and electrocuted by Zhu Ying. Its attention was still focused on the ship. But with its terrifying size, those bullets and that electricity were nothing more than a tickle. If we didn't run now, we wouldn't get another chance. Open the doors. I didn't slow down at all, holding Zhu Ying tight as I charged toward the minibus, simultaneously ordering the Star Seed to open the doors. As we reached it, the doors popped open just in time. All three of us piled inside. Ying immediately took the driver's seat, starting the engine and accelerating in a split second. Shanghai also jumped into the refrigerated truck, ready to flee. From behind, Shin Dao yelled, "Start the truck! Go, go!" The moment the military truck started rolling, he leaped up and grabbed onto the back, getting pulled in by the people inside. Rumble. The convoy sped out of the port like mad. I looked out the window. The massive cargo ship was completely entangled by the monster, yet we still couldn't see its full body. Judging by the tilt of the hull, the entire ship was being forcibly dragged down into the water. I should try scanning this monster with the Star Seed, I suddenly thought. I could still see a part of its body right now. Skin level exceeds host's authority. Cannot scan. The Star Seed's response left me stunned. Just what level was this monster to exceed my current authority? This was also the first time I realized that my authority as the host was still restricted at this stage. The Star Seed explained that authority would gradually unlock as the base vehicle upgraded. What the hell was that thing? Rin Xiu asked, her face pale. I don't know, I replied heavily. But the only lucky thing is, it doesn't seem to be coming ashore. Just as I finished speaking, I suddenly swayed. Only then did I realize that my body felt completely drained.